Okay, it's a few minutes after 7 on September 19th, 2018, and I'm calling the Board of Health meeting to order. We have one scheduled hearing at 7:30 and then a number of other items on our posted agenda, but I am going to announce any items to be added as not reasonably anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance of the meeting. So we have one for an update on 195 Western Avenue. And then another one I'd like us to consider is that there was a posting on Nextdoor Sherborn about acid washing a pool, and I didn't know if we want to just kind of comment on that briefly. Not a question directly to us, but just the issue. And then I wanted to note something that was in the SOS minutes about effluent discharge from wastewater treatment plants.
And we also have the triple E.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, and we received a news release from the Massachusetts Department of Public Health about the first triple E positive mosquito of the season, not in Sherborn, but in the southeast Mass region. So, are there any other items that people would like to add?
I have a question, and that is, if we work on something which is not, if we work on, say if we discuss the material that the research that David is doing on ledge disruption, and we're working on that, but we haven't produced a document that's going to be, that's available yet that would be posted before we do a hearing. Is that something that we could discuss without it being on the agenda?
No.
Okay.
But I do have an item
it
related
is
to that
on
on
the
the agenda. On the updated agenda.
It is on the continuation of ledge disruption discussion.
Okay, and then we have that one, even more specific.
Yeah, so that was what I was hoping. It wasn't on the original preliminary agenda that I had. for
Yep.
some reason. And I was hoping we were going to discuss it, and so I was just wondering if we're not having a public hearing yet, if it's appropriate to work on it. But it's on the agenda anyway, so we will, I guess.
Yes, but if it wasn't on the agenda, then no.
Yeah, no, so that's my question was,
Public hearing, these are public
I
meetings, but
understand,
not
I
a public
understand.
hearing, so,
I understand.
okay. All right, so we had 4 items. Would anyone like to make a motion to accept all or
So
something
moved.
of them?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Okay. All right. Let's see. I'm wondering, I think I'd like to wait for the Western Ave until Mark is here.
Yeah. That.
Okay, and then the acid washing a pool issue that was posted on Nextdoor Sherborn, it's just somebody asking for advice about either contractors or service providers to help remove some stains from their pool, and they'd heard that acid washing could be effective. And I was just thinking that where are they discharging the acidic wash waters afterwards, and are they neutralizing them prior to discharge? And what kind of acid is it? Because I think differently about acetic acid,
Right.
which is really just
Vinegar.
carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, versus hydrochloric acid, which has chlorine, which, under the right circumstances, forms other chemical compounds that we're not so keen about drinking. I hope nobody would use hydrofluoric acid. So,
I would think a lot of them would be damaging to the pool surface as well. I mean, if it has a vinyl cover, it's going to eat right through that if it's anything stronger than like a vinegar acetic acid
or
kind of
even
thing.
cement would also
Yeah,
degrade
exactly.
cement.
It's
so-
limestone. There's calcium carbonate, so.
Right. So I'm not sure exactly what we could do about this, other than, I don't know if we,
Should I respond on Nextdoor and say?
well, that's a question. I mean, I hate to enter into that as our vehicle for information dissemination, but they might need this information because it's going to affect them presumably, or their neighbors, if it's not managed quite right. So, I don't know, what does anybody else think about contacting the person and just giving some
I mean, if you wanted
advice,
to give
or?
information as a knowledgeable person, not representing the
We
Board
can,
of Health.
we can do personal
You can
message it
respond.
too,
Yeah.
so you
Yeah.
don't have to do it in public, so.
Yeah.
we could-
So you could kind
I
of
mean,
be
I don't
direct.
think there's anything wrong with educating people because you're knowledgeable and it's your area of expertise.
But I think you could say if we
Is-
just want to individual outreach to that person
Yeah.
rather than inviting a larger dialogue on a forum that isn't always
No,
the most fruitful.
Yeah. I mean,
I could direct message her tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay. Just as,
you would be representing yourself.
Yeah,
Yep.
as a citizen.
yeah. Okay. All right, and then for the throngs who are watching this, they will also know if they have pools to just be cautious. Okay. And then I just read this, the SOS notes were, they're prepared by the group that meets pretty regularly, and they had some presentations about the 41 North Main Street project and just the concept of a general wastewater treatment facility downtown. And they had this quote that I thought is close, but anyway, it says, "A sewage treatment plant produces a clean, non-polluting effluent which can be discharged directly to a stream, ditch, or other watercourse, or in this case, likely to a field and dispersed into the soil." So clean, it's relatively clean. It's cleaner than it had been, but I wouldn't say it's perfectly clean, and oftentimes whatever requirements, discharge requirements have been placed on that is assuming some further treatment and/or dilution in the environment. So it's never perfectly clean, and then there are all the the emerging chemicals of concern that are not regulated yet, but which are widely recognized as problematic in these kind of even residential wastewaters. So I just want to comment on that. Any other insights? Okay. And then did you want to comment on this one?
Sure. So this is the notification from the Mass Department of Public Health that the first triple E mosquito was detected in, I think it was Lakeville in Plymouth County. And the single finding doesn't indicate an elevated risk of triple E, but again highlights the need for personal protection for prevention of mosquito bites. And then there's also a comment in the news release just for folks who have kind of large livestock, which I think they identify as horse, llama, and alpaca owners, should keep their animals in indoor stalls at night to reduce the risk of exposure, and speak to their veterinarian about kind of immunization as well as appropriate mosquito repellent, and continuing the advice we had for West Nile to have folks use appropriate precautions for humans with appropriate insect repellent, whether that's DEET. They list also permethrin, picaridin, oil of lemon, eucalyptus, or IR 3535. So again, I think no sort of immediate health threat, but just highlights the seasonal caution that's generally advised.
Okay. Do you happen to know, I believe that the mosquitoes carrying West Nile virus tend to be out at night, but
So
is it similar for,
I think so,
triple E?
but I would characterize my insight as non-expert.
okay. And mine too, that's just my recollection,
Yeah.
so, which may or may not be correct, but, okay.
I sort of generally think of it as sort of after dusk as being the area of concern for both.
Okay. All right. So. Okay. Oh, all right. Let's talk about item 6 under Chair's business. The health agent Halal's possible review of current Sherborn regulations. So Beth now has a laptop from the Board of Health, so both of our agents do have a laptop now. And we had talked early on when we were hiring her about whether, with her relatively fresh set of eyes, she would go through the regulations that we have and try to identify anything that might be, kind of the wording might be difficult to understand, or perhaps other regulations have changed and they're not quite aligning as smoothly as they once might have, that she also speak with Ellen and Mark about the types of common questions people might have about certain sections and whether we could work on improving those. And I just wanted to see if you think that's still something that would be worth having her do. And again, now that she has a laptop, it's a lot easier for her to be able to pursue that and do that research.
I think that makes sense, as long as, schedules can accommodate and she can still get the inspections and work done in her allotted, hourly commitment. I think that would be a great thing for her to.
Definitely,
Try and help
especially
us.
if she is, it's a good way to use her time, all her free time.
And do we want to put any kind of either number of hours per week limit or target date? I haven't given any thought to that just yet.
Well, how
but
many, so which regulations is she going to focus on?
Basically, our book of regulations, if we want her to focus on some more, actually,
We
you're
might
right.
want to prioritize.
Tobacco, she wouldn't need to do, but I could see the well and septic is what we
Mhm.
deal with the most, so
That's
that.
what, right,
the
I would say, let's
tobacco,
prioritize
the
that.
massage,
Yeah.
okay, so,
I think one of the ones that was identified as an area, I think we have lots of pieces we're thinking about right now, but also just thinking about our regulations as they apply to the multi-dwelling developments.
yeah, okay.
And then also, if we can look for neighboring communities to see if they have regulations specific to that, so that when we ultimately consider those, we've got that foundation.
Yeah,
Is your idea to just update things to current standards, or are you also thinking about ways we can improve the regs by adding some other things which are being done in other communities, for example, on Cape Cod, in having to do with Otis Air Force, for example, in Falmouth, all throughout that part of Cape Cod, there is denitrification regulation, which is new, and all new construction is required to submit a plan of denitrification. That's like a new thing
so,
that might be appropriate in Sherborn, because we have so many similarities with the situation in Cape Cod with risk to water, drinking water.
right, so that one, before I'd launch her on that, I'd want the board to talk more about it, because the research I've done about those regulations on Cape Cod, and this is too many details except other than what we're going to have her do right away, is Cape Cod has a regional commission that has gotten together to address the problem that Cape Cod is violating national water quality standards
yeah.
for nitrogen. And I would assume then also state standards. So that gives them a compelling reason to do the kinds of regulation that they're doing, which is also regulating fertilizer use and that sort of thing. So I'd want to understand better whether their example, which is driven by a regulatory deficiency in a region, gives them extra ability to regulate things that sometimes we can't go beyond. So, but, and maybe the MAHB conference would be a good place to find out whether that is something that other towns are pursuing on a more narrow front. I know we can't do the fertilizers. That's regulated federally, I believe. So
Well, there are only 12 towns in our situation.
I know,
So-
but we don't have,
There might not be a huge number of towns
I understand,
to compare ourselves
I
with.
understand the
There's a difference between
importance,
a
but,
coalition, though, that
Yeah.
when they're working together as a region versus us.
And they're tackling a
when maybe
violation
Dover
of-
isn't and these
Yeah.
surrounding towns aren't. So it's a little, and obviously the scale is quite different, too.
Right.
so And
Are
I
you
think
s-
we just need to understand that, but I think in general, if she's looking at multi-dwelling, or the way some others have worded things about semi-public wells, or whatever.
Community wells.
It'd be nice if we could find out about that, and if she sees anything, certainly on added nitrogen reduction requirements, I'd be interested to see that, but again, nitrogen is a concern, but I feel it gets too isolating in that people think that's the only thing we need to worry about, because so many of the IA technologies address nitrogen reduction, but there's a whole suite of things we need to be
Oh,
worried
yeah,
about.
absolutely.
In
No,
effluent.
I
So-
just thought it might be useful for us to use that as a example of how some of the few communities that have similar concerns are beginning to address some of the issues. And obviously, some of the subjects are slightly less relevant, like fertilizer use. But
Right, which seem to be a
but with the
big part of what
proximity
they're doing,
to
but-
urban areas, we end up having, nitrogen is sort of like a marker.
Right.
Sort of, and it would be worth just seeing what they're doing, because the context of new construction is an easy way at the state level that a lot of these things are introduced, just because it's in the setting of construction that
Can I see if I can
issues
kind
are
of summarize,
raised.
because this feels very big, so let me see if
Yeah.
I can summarize it as the ask, which is to look and see if there are comparable regulations in similar communities about nitrogen regulation independent of other regulations. Is that the question?
Well, no, the question is whether we're focusing on updating our regs to be at sort of current standards and maybe better run, a bit, more efficient, but also is this the time to introduce some new concepts that might be relevant?
I think those
Sequentially, I
are-
would do it
are
first
bundled.
with the,
Yeah.
make sure that what we have works, and we've identified some gaps, like the multi-dwelling systems that I think we
Yeah.
need to address that are more time sensitive, and then I think there's that best practice transition that you're talking about for
Yeah.
what's the newest, which
So I was
is.
more asking what our
I
goals
think,
are.
I think
I
our
think
goals of the
ultimately
phase
to-
one is to sort of
yeah.
make sure that we have good regs that identify known gaps, and as we resolve that, I think then phase two is looking at new areas to continue to protect our water supply, like the nitrogen loading and the other pieces. But I would almost do that second, after making sure that we have a good multi-unit solution.
However, our agent has good experience on obviously septic and well installation, so she might already see some things that are omissions in our
Yeah.
regs. So it's not like I think we need to dissuade her from considering and if there's additions
Yeah.
and improvements
Right.
you think
Yeah.
that should be made, do that all at once. Let's be
Absolutely.
efficient
Yeah.
about it. So if there's something easy and,
Obvious.
kind of obvious, I think that, of course, we should.
Yeah, and if Scott Horsley, we're already working with Scott Horsley, and he's doing some of the work, we can use it as a guide.
Talk about him too much
No,
right
no,
now,
I'm
but,
just saying
okay.
that we have the opportunity to communicate at a more personal level with individuals who are involved in the process, and that might be helpful for us.
So it sounds like we have a good scope for this question to kind of
Okay.
really start with.
Okay, and then we can always
Did you have
add
a
other
target
things.
date? You had mentioned a
target
target
date
date
and level
and
of
and
effort.
hours limit.
Well, how about, should we just target December? I don't know.
Okay, or, yeah, I mean, that would be fine, and I guess, maybe I just really need to talk to her, or if somebody else, well, no, I guess it's Sharon.
It's really gonna
Talk to
depend
her
on
about,
Hours and,
right, how many hours she can have.
Right,
To give to
availability.
this, and some sequencing of where the priorities are. Although I don't think it'll be too bad as long as, and if anyone remembers things that people come in and have questions about, or kind of rough spots, parts of our regs where they don't understand, and that we can make things clear, that would be great to relay to her.
I thought this one was obviously near and dear to my heart, so
Oh, yes, okay,
adding that.
yeah. Well, that's what I want us to
Yeah,
talk
yeah,
about
yeah.
this evening, so.
I know.
So that sounds good for number two.
So, okay, so, I think, I'm inclined to think maybe not more than 10 hours a week,
Yeah.
just so we can see how the progress is going without it going too far.
Well,
And then I'll just have her,
you
You know, check in,
Yeah.
1 month.
see what's,
That sounds good. And I think in terms of the prioritization, I think the routine business of the health, like if faced with competing priorities,
Yes.
I think the routine
Obvious, yeah.
business of the health agent is a priority over the regulatory review.
okay. All right, so up to 10 hours a week, and with a check-in, I'd say maybe even after a couple of weeks, or a couple of weeks to a month, depending
Yeah,
on, you know,
2 to
if
4
she doesn't
weeks.
have time to get to it, then a
Right.
couple of weeks won't be enough, but I'll try and keep in touch with her on what she's finding and how it's going. So, okay.
So did you do the 41 North Main Street update?
No,
Or
not
Not
yet.
really, okay.
So, might wait for Mark also, because he would be, you know, potentially a person going out there or reviewing plans, and so.
What's 5 about?
The governance.
Oh, let's see if I can do that quickly, probably. So, there is a governance committee in town. I think it was appointed by the town moderator for town meeting, and various members on that committee have been meeting with staff and chairs of boards and committees in town, and different departments in town, to see where there might be, what's working well, what could go smoother, ideas that people have about what's needed, what's coming up in the future. It was sort of a broad set of topics just on seeing how improvements could be made. So the person assigned to us was Corey Lincoln. So she met with Ellen, right? You met with her first. And you want to, in
It's a while ago.
half a minute, I know. It was a while ago for me,
Said
too.
everything's basically perfect.
She's the person in town who came to interview Ellen and I about the Board
I
of Health
did talk
separately.
about the space issues
Mhm.
that we have.
I'm confused. Who is she representing?
The governance.
Governance
Governance committee, that's what I, yeah. So, and the working, doing the minutes at home
Yeah.
question?
Yeah, I brought that up.
Mm-hmm.
Right, as did I, so
Um,
since we had separate meetings, and
She asked about how the staff in the Board of Health get along, how we get along with other staff in Town Hall. I said, fine,
Mhm,
that was no issue,
No
right.
as
brawls.
far as I could get.
Yeah. The only thing I mentioned on that regard is that I thought when the building inspector was also in that office, that it made working on particular
Oh,
projects a lot
much
easier,
easier.
because everybody was right
Right
there
there.
and could just
yeah.
share information.
One-stop
what
shopping,
have you.
kind
Yeah.
of.
So,
That's
and,
true.
you know, I understood there's space and other reasons
Yeah.
that might have moved, but that was, I thought, easier for all the boards and committees to get their work done together.
So are they producing a document that has the output and synthesis of these interviews, or no?
I guess eventually, but I don't know what the timeline is, so it might be hard to judge.
It seems like it wouldn't have a purpose otherwise, unless someone
Right.
was getting this information and then going to use it to maybe better things. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and this was a couple of months ago at this point,
Yeah.
I think, so I'm trying to remember.
Yeah.
But we just didn't have time on all of our other meetings earlier than this to discuss it. I also talked about the files and the space, and that we need to have these files on record, because if we don't preserve the files, many properties don't have files that carry over from when their system was put in. As we've seen, if you have those records and they demonstrate a design to a certain standard for septic, for example, that the DEP will give a lot of credit to that, and then it can change whether or not someone needs to upgrade their septic system. So it's important for us to maintain them. We can't just purge them.
How about scanning?
Well, I talked to her about scanning, and that would be great.
That's what DEP does, for
Right.
example, with all their old files. They spent 1 year going, and then everything more recently is electronically submitted for
Right.
like any
Technology
regulatory
exists.
MCP stuff. So, I mean, that's obviously a significant space saver. It's
Right.
sustainable.
So what I conveyed to her is that it's really important, though, if we can get someone who can do that kind of scanning, because it cannot fit into the staff's current
Oh, right, no.
work
This is-
schedule.
Right.
But it has to be someone who is knowledgeable enough of the topic to be able to assign the proper names to all the files so that things are findable after they've been scanned, right? So if they're not named properly, we're going to really lose track. And that person has to be really precise, because things start getting assigned to the wrong property, and then
Well, I
the
mean-
records are effectively lost. So,
Right, no, they have to be competent, and they have
Yeah.
to be, you know.
and not mildly competent,
No.
like very competent for that kind of task. So, but other than that, I thought we'd still need some paper files, because really some of the plans don't work well for review when they're on a screen, and unless we're going to have some giant screen somewhere where people can review things, it's not, we're going to still need some, but it could be greatly reduced from what it is now. So that was a major topic. I explained some things about the issues in the past with the IG's office and complaints against the Board of Health, and really some of the behind-the-scenes information on that. And if I think of anything else. Had another meeting, but now we have a hearing, scheduled hearing for
5
a
Jackson.
septic replacement, yes, at 5 Jackson, I see, hi. Owners, and the engineer are here, engineer's representative.
The other half of the engineer, Eileen McIntyre, Dan's wife
that's
and
funny.
co-owner of McIntyre Engineering. Every now and then, we have conflicting meetings, so he gives me a cheat sheet. Now, I got the plans for you.
Sorry, Rick.
No, they need to see it up on TV.
No, they don't.
All right.
And all
Preps?
the green cards we have, Eileen brought them in last week or the week before.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's all set.
So the Krebs decided they were going to landscape their front yard. And due to
Oh,
the
yeah,
nature
yeah.
of their property, they have their septic system in their front yard. So they were smart enough, because they said, we better have an evaluation of it due to the age of the system. So they did a voluntary Title V, which they failed. We confirmed that it was in failure during soil testing. The leach field is completely saturated. So with the way this particular lot is, there are wells in the backyard, so it needs to go, the new system needs to go back in the front yard. Danny had a few different issues that he had to deal with. The topography, it's a little deceptive, but the road kind of slopes back, the land slopes back towards the house. There's a nice little gas
Very
pipeline going right through the front yard, up by the road. We're not in that easement by anything. And then the neighboring wells, there's a pre-existing condition as far as closeness. But we'll go over each of those once you want to start discussing the variances. I don't know how you want to handle it. He gave me a cheat sheet, so I
Okay.
can discuss each one.
Well,
He did
you
an
have-
out-
do we-
Oh, yeah, we have that, I think. Yeah.
since there are no abutters, we might streamline things a little. When
Okay.
a butter comes in, we'll make sure to backtrack and review, but
You guys all know what an Elgin system is, right?
Yes.
Sand filter,
it's a nice picture.
right?
So,
Okay.
So I don't know
The
if
first one-
other folks can tell, but certainly, at first glance, once one has the radius around the well on the property, there's a kind of small slice of the property left up by the road, and then once the neighboring well's radius is drawn, that's reduced
Yeah, he-
significantly.
It's right here, this line here is the
Yep.
125. And so this is the existing one. And so he's made an improvement on it, just that little corner.
Okay. So there's not a lot of land left,
No.
is basically what it comes down to.
So the existing one, though, how far was that from the abutting well?
It was 10 feet closer, so about 110 feet.
Okay. And the Title V default, is that 125?
If it's,
The Title V.
Title 5 is 100.
Oh, it's 100, okay. Okay. I knew it was like 50 or 75.
And so the take home for
Wetlands.
kind of looking at this is there's no other place to put it.
No other place to put it, and
Better
it's
than
in
it is.
failure, and you're getting it 10 feet further
with Title
away.
V.
So that's the kind of stuff
None
that
of ours.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I care about, so, okay.
We increase ours with down.
And then,
by
because you
25.
had so little
Good
land to
soil,
work with,
Another
the
25.
groundwater was not.
It was five and a half. No, we're not going to meet the 5 foot. So
not right.
that's why you designed the element. This is right down the street. It also helps with the grading, the sloping over the system once it's put in. So we don't want to create a drainage problem towards the house.
Okay, and Mark, do you have any particular comments on this?
I'd like to see the Elgin drain diagram again, so I can take a peek at it and pass it around.
Oh, this guy?
Yeah, I'd like to be able to show it to the board members if
I'll
they
need
want.
to keep it then.
Is that
as a
okay? Do you need
document.
this
Do you
copy?
need it?
No.
Okay,
That's what they look
so
like.
I'll need to
They're
keep it.
spongy items, and they put the pipe right over with the filter fabric. I don't see a problem with any of the waivers based on the limitations caused by both the wells and also the fact that they are downhill wells, so we increase the distance by 25, and it's less than 1 minute per inch of sandy soil. But again, this is improving the system. They're using these Elgins that are treatment systems on their own as the leaching field. And the other factor is you are getting a little further away from the wells. So, and the reason I asked for the Elgin diagram is it's interesting to show people, they get 40% reduction in the size of the system as well as distance to groundwater on those units based on the way they're designed to allow treatment within the actual cones and fibers of the Elgin. So I didn't mean to take your
No, that's
Elgin
fine.
diagram. We can make a copy if you want, but I wanted the other board members to see the technology. It's used quite often now. So,
Thanks.
and I recommend that you approve the plan, well, the variances, and I'm going to recommend approval of the plan.
Okay. And then the other one was property line
Yeah.
setback, and
Just by
that,
3 feet.
Okay.
It's instead
Town
of the
street.
20, it's 17 feet, that little corner.
yeah, and that is to get it further from the house, further from the wells, as much as possible. and-
Yes.
Okay. And then without encroaching on the gas line, so.
Yeah, that's a good point.
If we
This
would've
size
had a little bit more
property, there's
space,
much
that
room to work
particular
in.
pipeline wasn't there.
Toot spots.
A little different.
Well, that's
So-
the actual line, but that's the easement.
But, okay,
So it
so
really
I
cuts
think,
in.
does anyone have any other
Shows there.
particular questions, or actually can ask too, as we go through the variances, but.
So which one is it?
Go for it.
Motion-
the
ask for
serial.
motion.
We're using it in the trench formation.
Trash, okay.
The soil is not disturbed below around.
So it's like a
there.
centipede.
The whole thing's only 4 feet from top to
helpful.
bottom.
It is.
How much?
Not that
Because
I
those
do much
work
of
so
that.
well, they're given the distance to groundwater of 3 feet. I was explaining to
Oh,
Dave,
I
I'm
see.
sorry.
Okay, it's right
Don't like
there.
having
All right.
separate meetings,
right.
but I was explaining, and Dave had a good question. They allow you to go to within 2 feet of groundwater unless the soil is less than 2 minutes per inch, which this soil is. So they can only take the option of the 3 feet to groundwater. Normally it would be either 4 feet in non-porous soil and 5 feet in porous soil here, or it reduces to 2 and 3 versus 4 and 5. And I was explaining that to Dave, and again, based on the DEP's approval and the scientific technology behind it.
So does that mean that the variance for 8.01,
It's 3 feet.
3.1 feet is the actual distance they're going to be from groundwater, adjusted
Okay.
groundwater.
but so in the rationale, should that be, and allows a 2-foot reduction in
Right.
groundwater?
No, this would be the 3 feet by state.
No, 5
2.
minus 2 is 3.
Ah, perfect.
Yeah,
There we
you're
go.
doing
Yeah, yeah.
subtraction, I have to get up to that part.
Yeah.
So,
Okay,
yes, that is
perfect.
correct.
Sounds good.
Just like kindergarten.
I'm in first grade now.
Sounds good.
So, okay.
You graduated.
All right, so do we have a motion to grant a variance to section 8.01?
So, second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
We have a motion to grant a variance to 10.1 BC.
So moved.
Second.
And any other comments, questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
We have a motion to grant a variance to section 10.2.
So moved.
Second.
Questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and then we have some waivers to Title
The
V.
same thing, it's like,
Okay, so we just have one.
And there's the
Okay.
subtraction that you were asking.
Yes. Requited.
So, all right, do we have a motion to grant a variance to Title V, Section 15.4051H?
So moved.
Second.
And all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And so there are no others, and I'll close the hearing. And is the plan ready for approval?
The plan is ready for approval, conditional to deed recordings, both for the I-8 Innovative Alternative Technology as well as for the garbage grinder. And I just want to note to the board that the board does prefer any type of systems to be put in trench formation when possible and feasible, and that it was completed on this system here. It's in trench formation. The Elgin drains are in trench formation.
Very good.
Recommend approval.
Thank you for that.
Good.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve the plans with the conditions noted by Mark?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, any other comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Perfect.
Here's
That's okay. I told her once, I'd like to educate you.
Once is not a good.
Daryl, could you send
Well, it
it?
was my fault.
Yeah.
That's right, no good deed goes
It'll go out in tomorrow's mail.
Permits?
right.
Yeah.
You're guarded.
We will, we will.
I don't, I review it as the health agent, but I do see them.
All right.
Okay, speed meeting?
I'm still writing.
Oh, okay.
Come on, that was easy stuff.
Not speed.
You got a lot of pens, just 2 hands. Stuff
Yeah, I
hands,
thought-
me in
yeah.
the middle.
Yep, yeah.
All right. Why don't we, I'm going to try to do the easier ones.
Madam Chair, if I
It's
can,
like, oh, yes.
if I just, I wanted to let you know, I did receive, and I know it's not on the agenda, and it can wait for the next one if you so wish, or the board, but Claire Golden.
Yep.
Oh, no, it's on the agenda.
We
We
added.
added it.
Oh, okay, thank you. Never mind. Never mind.
Beat you to it.
195 Western.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you want to just
Should we do it?
195? Yeah.
Yeah, let's just do it.
Let's do it.
Okay, it's your
Okay.
moment.
Well,
Can I interrupt for a
yeah,
moment?
I know you have to do something.
recuse
but-
Oh, yeah,
myself,
that's right.
so-
Okay.
Because I'm in a butter.
Oh,
Right.
So the simple answer to the whole situation is that you cannot.
No. How about that? I read it.
We're done.
I read the text.
It just can't be done. So I don't know how the board wishes to communicate that to the engineer, and it's brand-new information.
Right.
But you can look at the, thank you, Ellen, very thorough for getting
And what
that
Mark
phone
is
message.
mentioning is very thorough, is that we had questions from the last meeting. You posed the questions to Claire Golden at Mass DEP, and she left a apparently lengthy message, phone message, and Ellen has transcribed that, describing what can and cannot be done at 195 Western Avenue.
So so basically is saying that you could never just augment or consider adding to an existing system in this kind of scenario. You would have
Exactly.
to
It's commercial mixed
start
into residential.
and that's just doesn't work.
One or the other.
Yeah.
You can live
And
Yeah, he's not gonna.
they may be able to, if they can get the easements, put another septic system leaching field right next to this one. I don't want to design it for them, but they
No,
do
but we
need to find.
we discussed that they
But we
could
sort of
maybe-
asked the question, like, so the question was, can we do this? And the guidance from the state is no, not
Yeah.
in a residential application, which this
Yeah.
is.
They're not
And
going to
then-
be happy, but.
Yeah, but again, I think that comes back to the state, like, we're just the askers, the state answered. and
We're the
said-
messenger.
Yeah,
And I think even just providing
It's a tough
this
message, but
memo
yeah,
Yeah.
that's-
to
Yeah.
them would be perhaps the clearest way to communicate, and then offer if they have questions, they
And
can
the-
call you or something.
And clearly, in terms of if they are willing to design and build a supplement, a second septic,
Second system for that.
clearly, the information in the format, it was provided to us about similar and anomalous, outliers being eliminated from consideration to determine what the adequate flow rates are, is also not going to fly. It's going to need to be a much
15
more
gallons per
empirically
seat.
based.
and I think it sounds like the state is the approver, like, it's not
Right,
us-
right.
us to adjudicate it,
Exactly.
it's,
You will
Yeah.
approve it,
Yeah,
Yeah.
but the state has to approve it.
if they
Right.
go off
Yeah.
the chart.
Right, and then the other issue, if they got to that point, is the issue of a public water
Yes.
supply, which if they need to do that, they're going to need the appropriate Zone 1 radius around a well, which,
That's
depending on whatever the flow rate is, or the water
And if I'm-
supply volume is determined to need to be, then that could be a significant diameter. Maybe not impossible
Yeah.
for the property, but it would be.
Parking may be the issue, how close the parking lot is to the well.
Oh, yes, if they had to add more parking. And,
but I think
Away-
that's sort of
away
all,
from-
like, I think
Yeah.
these are all, like, ultimately, this is just us saying, this is the guidance from the state, so I
Yeah.
think that it's up to the applicant to figure out
Right.
what the considerations are and to adjudicate that,
right.
and whether that project makes
Right.
sense in this framework. And so will this be part of the minutes, and we'll make this available? Like, can we,
Yeah.
we can provide this memo
Can do
to,
it. Yeah,
the
So is someone
engineer
going to do that officially from the board? Is this going to be
can
provided?
you forward this to them as an attachment and just?
an attachment to what?
An email?
To an
Oh,
email.
just, oh, yeah, yeah.
Response.
Keep the email short, and Mark, are you okay if they call you with any
Sure.
other questions?
So forward it to
Okay.
Paul Saunier,
Yeah,
and
I was just
I
gonna
don't have
suggest that.
Jonathan Hudson Walker's email
Okay, then
but
I
I
guess
can
it will have,
call
and ask Paul to,
to forward
share
it to
with
the applicant. Okay.
That way he's prepared before he talks to him.
Yeah, that might be better. Quick question, though. In terms of the water supply, I totally understand all the points about the septic. If they did limit it, though, to not doing the preparation and not doing washing, et cetera, they might not really need a significant amount more water supply. So if their current supply is adequate, does any, in terms of the water supply, is that even
I
an
think
issue?
it's more the opportunity to use that water, even if they're limiting it, such as if the clientele come in and they drink the water, expose themselves to a dermal effect. I think there's a point of so many people, so many months. It's that 25, if I'm
Oh, yeah, yeah.
5 people for
service,
60 days.
So
Right.
25 or more over
But as long
60.
as they stayed under that and their own well was adequate, then they wouldn't trigger
Right.
any of this stuff. So,
But I
so,
think her point is that they need to understand those metrics.
no,
'cause
no,
yeah.
I agree. I just wanted to make sure I understood that as long as they were really doing modest use and they kept it below that occupancy threshold,
Yeah.
that piece might not really be a significant issue.
But I think what she's trying to say is still send them to DEP to make
Oh, yeah,
sure
no,
they
no.
answer the
I get- yeah.
questions.
Okay.
'Cause
And
it's
that
getting-
issue
it's
of-
changing.
Keeping a log, because, Mass DEP really doesn't want to see lots of people drinking an unregulated,
Water
no
supply.
longer regulated
Right.
water supply, right? It's in the hands of the private owner.
Right.
We approve it, so, okay.
Oh, well.
Okay, well, at least that was I appreciate Claire taking the time to provide such a
Yeah,
thorough.
super
Very
helpful.
clear.
Yeah.
It was very clear. So,
Do you want to do the 41 North Main Street update?
Okay, so
Sure.
David can come back.
I want to cross cross out.
Should give a nice example to, with the state.
Yeah, no, I saw that, about the tent and the luxury inn.
Popular now, outside.
That was one night.
Look at, that's what, the Heritage.
Figure out where it was.
Is we're
Okay.
doing a lot of outdoor events.
Was I the only one there?
I watched the video.
Okay.
But that's not residential, so.
That was a long night with a lot of different things going on that I wasn't expecting to, while I was sitting waiting for 41 North Main. So in any case, the proponents for 41 North Main came in and provided some more information about the project. And indeed, it looks like there's some other housing that's being, so there's the property up front, which would have the assisted living facility that's on Main Street. And then further down Hunting, it looks like they are proposing to put in some other housing, mixed housing.
I thought it's a
possibly.
mixed use, like retail.
Oh, no, that
there's the
would
main
be
compound.
still-
So there's
yeah.
the main compound that's the same project. They've now fleshed out the abutting lot that's owned by the same property owners that was not in the initial proposal.
Right, no, I understand
Yeah.
that, but I read something
it's
saying that
resident.
there was, I read that they were contemplating mixed use,
I think
which,
the presentation was residential use consistent with Sherborn's density and housing
okay, but.
No, the mixed
they-
use
they
would be on
differ-
the Main Street
parcel.
parcel.
So the one that's also being used for the assisted living.
Right.
So they could potentially have,
So I think
A
that'd be like the
restaurant
retail,
or-
Right.
restaurant, shop, assisted living. And then I didn't see any particular connection.
this
between
vision,
the
I'm just trying to
things.
picture this.
Like, there was nothing I saw articulated about the connection between what the Hunting Lane development would be and what the 41 North Main would be, other than common
There is
ownership.
absolutely no detail on the Hunting Lane portion,
Right,
nothing on that.
And that's
So,
like near the railroad tracks?
yeah. The railroad tracks kind of bifurcate
No,
the
I know, I've
property.
biked over
Yeah.
them many times, but, okay, I'm just trying to picture all
Right,
this.
so
It's
I did
really
ask
hard.
Yeah,
if they could, and this really comes at the end. So first, there was a lot of discussion about wastewater treatment needs, what other options there were, where might it go on the ball fields, where would the building go, where would pump stations go? So lots of things were being
Logistics.
discussed. Let's see, from Board of Health perspective, I mentioned that there was a time when, for systems like this, for this kind of project, where you would have a package treatment plant, so a smaller wastewater treatment plant associated with the project, there was a push to have the buildings that would be doing the treatment located close to the projects
Yes.
themselves, as opposed to far off from the, whatever was being put in, that it was serving, so that if it wasn't performing well and there were odors and that sort of thing.
It would be
that-
affecting that
Right,
project.
it would be affecting the users right away, and
Right.
it usually got better attention, is
Right.
what various
Not a
studies
kid running
saw
for a fly ball.
in, yeah, as opposed to, right, people playing on the fields
Right.
and noticing the odors there, and then there's a long delay maybe between when it might get addressed. Not that that would be their case, but it has happened elsewhere. So,
Carol, if I may, while you're on the subject, just curious if it's come, I know you brought it up, pharmaceuticals,
yes,
animal products.
yeah, we
are
did talk
they
about just
In
that
general,
it's not easy to remove that later. Could they look at systems where, or whatever kind of methods within the facility to try to isolate that and keep it out? But also, if the wastewater treatment plant is owned and operated by the town, one can set the regulations for discharges into it that you feel is appropriate to whatever
Capacity.
quality standards and other performance metrics you're trying to meet. So, such as MWRA, and I worked with MWRA in projects like this, when they were making fertilizer out of the sludge, they were having trouble getting it classified as fertilizer because certain metals were too high, or other
It was
kinds
copper.
of chemicals. Molybdenum was one.
or was,
So I was part of a technical assistance team who was going out to industries, to find out where was that stuff coming from,
yeah.
and then what could people do about it instead, because that affected, their requirements at the
wanna
other
apply it
end.
if it
So,
has-
and there are also TSCA regulations that don't permit the discharge of biocides into publicly owned treatment works because they do disrupt the bugs that are trying to do the other work. So there are other examples of things that we could probably put some restrictions, but they need to know that so they can plan for it up front. Oops, now, let's see. So as part of the discussion, they were also asked how much would they be willing to contribute to the system. And they mentioned that since they could have septic systems, their alternative would be to install septic systems to service this. And I'm guessing that that would be a couple $100,000 worth of septic system. So again, that's my guess based on the sizes and other projects we've seen in town. But that would be what they would be looking to contribute, which might only be, say,
A small
10,
percentage of the total
5,
cost.
10, 15, 20% of the cost of a system, so, of a bigger system.
And there's a fair amount of discussion, at least what I recall from the video, about the sort of various systems that have long existed downtown that are not in compliance, and that sort of being a multi-year issue that the hope is. But I think it's a question of, I think the developer was framing it as being like an anchor tenant for the downtown wastewater treatment, and the question is how much value does that bring, how much cost does that cover, versus the costs associated with getting other downtown parcels that have non-compliant wells and septics because they're in such close proximity to each other. And it seemed like most of their selling point was, we would be here and you would have this guaranteed piece of revenue while others could opt in or opt out. But there was a fair amount of discussion about the details of that and sort of figuring out what's the problem we're trying to solve. Are we trying to solve a non-compliant downtown residential
exists.
parcel problem that exists?
Yeah.
Are we trying to prophylact against a future Pine Hill problem or other city properties downtown? Are we trying to solve a problem for the developer? And it seemed like that shifted at different points of the conversation and the framing, like which problem we're trying to solve. And so I think the developer saw it as, we will help solve the problems that you have, but it's not our expectation that we will be shouldering most of the burden, but rather this gives you an opportunity to cover that 20%, but the 80% is your problem. This is not our system. And then I think the select board kind of shared the concern of the ability of us to kind of pursue a large-scale public works project is tricky, and that finding that balance was hard.
And didn't I see something about also the issue of the water supply and the tension between, should we focus on the wastewater treatment first, or what about the supply side? How does that resolve?
I think that was the discussion, was sort of brought up by the select board with which piece goes on the public land. So what was that? There's like an Article 95 or something else with how the ball fields were acquired by the town through eminent domain or something like that. There was some state regulation based on the use of the fields where the concern was that the septic system use was very different than if you could use a smaller area of that property for a wellhead. That would be easier for whatever the state reg was. And it sounds like for the developer, the sandy soils or whatever the soil type that's under the ball field solves the septic problem, where they have other equally viable well solution. So from their standpoint, what they need to do is get rid of effluent, not acquire water.
Okay. I just saw that brought up as like.
But there's an issue about whether the buildings could be placed, so there was some discussion about having the treatment plant building and the pump station be on the proponent's property, was another.
That could still happen,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And they didn't say no. The other thing I asked them was if they could give us a sense of what that hunting lane development might look
Yeah,
like,
do they have
and
any,
what
like,
kind of
models
flows would be coming from there. That might help understand what is their contribution going to potentially be to the wastewater treatment
In
plant.
total, yes, yeah.
So that was a question, and there's something else you said that made me think.
So is a hunting lane, is it like a clustered, like development? What are they proposing?
haven't said a thing
was
about
very
it.
It was just like, here be
It was more like a
monsters.
bubble that says, and something over here.
Yeah.
But
that's
no sense of
You know,
density
And that's
or-
why knowing that
Yeah,
would,
okay.
provide more information about how much.
So, because in reality, could they put, if they do both of those, could they actually end up using all of the capacity
Well,
of the
that's the
wastewater
question, 'cause
treatment
then-
plant?
Then it doesn't,
Okay.
then you're not serving anyone else
Right, you're really
downtown.
just
Right.
serving
That's
yourself.
important to know.
Right.
And it's also a question of, do you force existing properties
That are
downtown to
non-compliant.
then sign in? So, and we have to be careful on the term non-compliant. They're
Right.
non-conforming to
Okay,
current
yeah.
regulations, but they are compliant because we've
They're-
approved
right,
their
Right, that's
Right.
an important
new
distinction.
septics that they've
May-
installed and all the rest, so,
That did happen in Wayland, and it was contentious.
yeah,
as it
it's a lot of
relates
money
to-
if they've just invested.
Yes. So the smaller strip malls were asked to tie in to the Stop and Shop Plaza, and the rates were very high for the tie-in, so it caused for a lot of friction. So you may want to pull the Wayland information. It's where the old Raytheon used to be. It's now a Stop and Shop.
I know exactly where that is.
That had some, I don't know, case law or something to it, but it was the same concept. They were trying to, I think, bring in quote-unquote non-compliant areas to their system and to add to their
Or
flow.
non-conforming.
Non-conforming, yeah, they weren't
I need to say
non-conforming.
that because
Yeah.
I don't
Right,
want
yeah,
to give
they're
anyone the
compliant.
idea that
And they're not
folks downtown
non-compliant,
aren't doing
I
what
agree.
they've been required to do by us.
Like, as we say, antiquated maybe as well,
Yeah.
but non-conforming. But that case study might be available because it was a rocky road in their process.
Oh,
Wayland.
actually, I don't know if you would be able, if the board, agrees that this would be something worthwhile for Mark to do, is just to see if we have any information about the soils at Jamieson Field, either from
Oh, I
the
do.
Pine Hill, just so we know
Tested
if
it.
this is remotely viable technically.
High groundwater, very sandy.
That's what I was afraid of.
So
So-
the sandy part isn't bad, but the high groundwater part
Well, the
is
sandy
bad?
part is bad because
It'll
the
perk
treatment
itself
is
out.
like
It's
next
just
to
going to go
nothing.
through.
Yeah.
It just goes through and you have
Yeah.
high groundwater. So even though it's allowed, I'm not sure that that's great.
Preferable, yeah. And
So-
what about on the parcel that they're gonna propose a facility? What kind of soil?
Up at 41,
Yeah.
we had a soil evaluator from UMass come out because it was being tested by Paul Saunier years ago. And models were found at 4.5 feet, and that's a very close to the magical 5 feet. that-
Right.
Not magical, but the
Right.
number that we look at. And the soil evaluator agreed with the 4.5 feet. So it's a till.
It's till,
definitely
okay.
not sand.
Okay.
But you come down to where the light is, and just that strip right there, that's sandy as well. So I think that area of sand is right at the flat end of if you're looking at the property from the light coming into town, to the left towards the Sherborn Inn.
Yep.
And I think that sand is part of the sand right near the apple orchard that used to be there, as well as the sand at the ball field. So it must have been all sand in that area. And, but then it changes to the till as you go up the hill.
Well, that makes sense, so.
Yeah, it's been tested a few times.
Okay.
So we have plenty of test data, and I don't know why we were testing the ball field. I know we went into it to test it actually in the ball field a couple of times, and I don't know if
Okay.
the town was looking at it. We're going back
If you
20
find
years.
some time and
Sure, I
to
can
just
see-
look that up so we have an idea. I don't know if they've come in yet to look at the files and
Yeah,
check on
they-
that.
good
I mean,
data
So
from-
if this is what the town is possibly considering. Because I tried to make it clear that either me personally or the Board of Health isn't necessarily saying no, it's just saying that we need to be careful about these things because they are issues. You can't just kind of hope everything will go okay because that wouldn't really be fair to the people who live downtown now and are drinking the water if
Well,
something
and especially
happens
if
to
you're also
theirs.
like kind of in proximity to the water for the elementary school or for other things,
Yeah.
you just want to make sure that this is the window of time to apply the due diligence.
It's going to make the situation worse for the people who are already there.
Right, and that, there are technical issues and they just have to be looked at creatively and see what can be done to address all of these different concerns. So the one other thing I was thinking about is if it gets to the point where they're going to put in a well, which would be a public water supply, is what they're talking about at the moment. They haven't talked about, dividing up and doing multiple wells. So that becomes a Mass DEP
Regulated.
issue. But that might be something where we want to request that any pump testing done there, because I don't know what the volume of water is that they're going to need from there.
Yeah, but it should be kind of a
But-
similar pull-down consideration for the
Yeah.
abutters, for the.
Quantity.
Yeah, for the other
We've
North
looked at
59
before.
North Main, to
Right.
just be consistent.
Yeah.
Because again, that seems like it would be a substantial drawdown for
Yes.
120 units of residential space.
And retail and X number of
Yeah,
residential units beyond, so.
And will it be overburdened or not? That, there are wells down there that are very deep into the ledge, to 900 feet. Because once you're in the ledge, the water's not there.
Oh, that would be the other thing, is if there are well records for,
They were
up on
doing-
that property on, I forget what the number is. There's a house that's associated with this Hunting Lane property.
Oh, yeah,
It's
well-
way, a long, long driveway, way up.
That was like part of the property at one time. They were soil evaluating.
Yeah, and so there might be well records there, just to know what yields were
Yeah.
over there, if they're high
I
or
did a
low.
housing code there years ago. It's an older house, but there may be. But if not, we have some other properties towards Town Hall that we know about, and we have well records. So I don't know when they were doing the water study, if they did any drawdowns in that area to see, or capacity type pumping to see what they had. But
Yeah, I
the
don't know
town was
either.
involved with looking for public water supply.
Oh, yeah, no, that was out by
Morse.
Morse Road.
But then they ended up down Morse Road. I think they wanted to be closer, but they kept ending up moving further out. So there may be data on that. We might have some leftover
Okay, if you can
data.
find anything that just gives a hint as to that kind of thing. So anyway, I would want to make sure, since that they, just test enough wells around this when the time comes. So, only because I had a business client with a public water supply across the street from a large 40B development, and they tested residential wells near it, but they didn't come over just across the street to test the client, so, which I thought was odd. So I'd like to maybe weigh in on that if it gets to that. That's all I can think of at the moment.
So is there a schedule for,
They were going to go back and maybe address some of the other questions that were raised at the meeting and get back to us. They're eager to start having public outreach meetings to talk about the project and some other things, so.
and it seems like there has been some receptiveness by the developer. Like, it seemed like they were able to hear some of the feedback and kind of rejigger things based on that feedback. So I think there's a good opportunity to be involved, because it seems like they're actually listening. They still have their own agenda, but actually we're able to pivot about where the wastewater treatment plants are, what the alternatives are. It seemed more thoughtful than some other projects we've seen.
and there was nothing mentioned about on Hunting Lane, that there would be some kind of affordability component to anything?
The concern was conveyed to them that.
'Cause
what
you're
was going to be
adding-
the compensation and what might they be willing to do.
Right.
Because
Since
that's
they're adding 120.
12 new units
Yeah.
just with that one project, but then if it's more housing, that's more, so.
Right.
Every
So
time
what,
we
they
add
need to
those.
offset.
Yeah,
Did they say anything about that?
nothing specific that I can remember, but, that wasn't what I was focused on. So, do you remember?
I think it was very non-specific. I think it was sort of more the planning board representative saying, this is one of the things that would be important to us to see addressed, because approving large projects that put us substantially further in the hole isn't very appealing. but there's sort of no commitment that I remember from the video.
Right, and I don't know if it was discussed then or just brought up as having been discussed before, that there are other kinds of facilities that are somewhat similar, I don't know what they're called, but that might count towards our affordable housing, but they didn't feel it was financially viable for them with this property, so,
Sounds good.
Okay,
okay.
thanks for the update.
Thank you for participating in that very long meeting. It's like 3.5 or 4 hours.
Yeah, something like that. Because I wasn't sure when the topic was coming up. But there were some
came
other
up at
things
the
that
end.
came up that applied to Board of Health along the way that I don't remember at the moment. But, okay, so we had a request from Spandies representative who had met with DSHS administrative person who was interested in having some sort of presentation to parents about vaping, e-cigarettes, what have you, and just wanted to know if anyone on the Board of Health would want to participate in that. So only because I was on the board when we passed the regulations to expanded our tobacco regulations to cover nicotine
E-cigarettes.
delivery systems.
Right.
So as broad as we could get with that, and
It's everything.
and also we cover so what ages that could be sold to, and we banned flavored,
Flavors.
candy flavored kind of products, the sale of those in town, because they're just targeted to children.
Did Dr. Hartman come to our meeting, Dr. Lester Hartman?
Some doctor did come
that was
and
who
made
it
a
was.
presentation that was great.
And
And
he's still a crusader in this area. And juuling's the new big one. Juuling is very concerning, because it looks like
Well, but that, I mean, that's what,
computer.
well, I relayed a story that an individual at the high school told me, who shall not be named, about kids bringing the Juul chargers into classrooms and trying to charge up their Juuls during class. Because you can just have the cord that goes into your laptop. Kids take notes on laptops. And so some of the teachers are pretty wise to that and will immediately call them out and have the headmaster come down, and they will be escorted out and whatever punishment will be meted out. But it's gotten pretty overt, it sounds like, in the school. To me, it seems like, I guess I'm surprised, why wouldn't someone from the school want to be the key part of that versus,
well, no, they probably
okay.
are having more than just us.
Well, us and someone from SPAN, yes, but I would just think that, someone from, whether it be Kyrie,
I would
Santos,
assume,
or
right, as part
the
of the
school
rules
nurse
in
and-
school about it.
yeah, or the
and then there's-
headmaster, but, they know the percentage, the prevalence, I guess, of the issue, and it's not, from vaping on school property, in the bathrooms, in the parking lots, discarding the cartridges in the school buildings, littering, all over the grounds, in the locker rooms. So it's quite pervasive, because it doesn't have the odor, or it's just a much more subtle way of, getting the.
Right, and that makes, unfortunately, it seems like it makes people think it's safe, and a lot of the ads
Right.
claim that it's safe, but it's nicotine. It's still
Very
nicotine, and I remember Dr. Chris Quinn mentioned that, and he works at Sturdy Memorial in Attleboro, that apparently some of the liquids that go into those, if you get them on your skin, you can die because they're concentrated.
Oh, the nicotine?
Yeah, absorb it through your skin, so.
Like Nicoderm.
Well, that's why transderm works. That's why the patches work,
No, that's
right?
what I'm saying. Not many things can actually get across the stratum corneum, but
Right.
tobacco can.
So, anyway, I mean, I can talk about the regulation that we passed and why and what was different. That would take a couple of minutes. But anyone else be interested in speaking,
From a health perspective, if you...
like a doctor?
Yeah. Hint, hint. I'm sitting way back now.
We'll let the two
But-
doctors figure it out.
I think the part that's tough is, like, the scope of what I do is sort of hospitalized adults. And so if I can get people to stop doing heroin in their neck and vape, that sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that the kind of question, like, I think there are a lot of unknowns about it in terms of how much is this a gateway into tobacco use or other pieces.
Or long-term even effects relative
We just
to
don't know.
conventional.
Yeah.
And actually, Dr. Quinn felt the
Yeah.
same, that it was important for people who were trying to stop smoking
Yeah.
to be able to use this as a tool. It just seems like kids are really thinking this is cool.
And
safe
completely
and-
innocuous.
Right.
Yeah, and I guess I don't disagree that based on the research I've read, that if you were going to light up, a pack of cigarettes versus
Right.
a limited amount of vaping, that the cigarettes
Right.
probably have a greater chance of having
But the difference is that
adverse
the
effects.
prevalence of the vaping is so much higher, where you're like, the kids who are vaping are not the
They're-
kids who would have lit up a pack of cigarettes, and
Right.
so it's new points of entry.
New point of entry, but also what I've seen like at colleges too is some of these young adults do it almost constantly.
Right.
Like it's not like
Right.
I'm gonna have a cigarette break now and I'm gonna go. It's just it's
like
a
old school smoking.
really
Right, because the
constant
craving
thing.
is so intense.
That's also worrisome. But I mean, obviously,
Right.
that isn't happening in the high schools because there's just not the opportunity to do that. But it's definitely a a higher percentage of kids than have been like smoking cigarettes. It's a much higher prevalence. So
So I'd be happy to be involved. I don't know that I have the bandwidth or expertise to sort of be primary content generator, but if having Dr. So-and-so involved and participating is useful, I'm happy to be involved, but I wouldn't kind of be able
Okay.
to say I'll generate the presentation.
Okay.
And
And I reached out to Chris Quinn to see if he would be interested, and it kind of depends on when it was.
did they
because
give a
it's
time frame or
scheduled.
no?
No, I asked about that. They didn't think it would be before this meeting.
there is a regional meeting being sponsored by Bay State, I think Community Partners. They are the regional director for this area for tobacco. Her name's Mary Cole. I can get you connected to her. She's working with me in another town. November 1st, there's going to be a juuling vaping session presented by Mary Cole, and it's going to be right in Framingham at Mass Bay. So if not the venue for here, at least you could talk with her and maybe she could create another venue. Because it's mostly the communities north of here.
Yep.
But at the same time, that's a possibility. So
Okay.
About
it's open to
Lindquist
all.
Commons.
Do you know where it's being presented on?
Mass Bay
November
Community
1st?
College at their auditorium. I've been involved with most of it, so, because there's been an outcry for parents to go to these events. It's for adults only, it's not for the students. I think they want to educate parents on recognizing that charger you might have mentioned that I may not even know what
Oh
it
no,
looks like.
it's pretty subtle.
Right.
And the way that it's being delivered, it's almost
Yeah.
smokeless. It's not odorous. It's
Yeah.
you can
Yeah,
do it a
that's-
lot more on the
But
DL.
the Juul, you can inhale that and nothing
even
comes
know.
out. If you
Yeah.
hold it in long enough, you won't even know the person. Where I was in front of a car, all this smoke was coming out, and they were actually using a vape unit that sends out a stream of
I've seen that
exhaust.
too. Yeah.
But
like a
the
dragon.
Juul, you just can hold it in, they say,
yeah,
and
no,
that's
it's
what
like-
Dr. Hartman
you
has
could go like this.
indicated,
So
it's a
Yeah.
problem.
Just in the interest of time, because I think we've got a
Sorry.
bunch of regulatory
We're done.
stuff, so it
Mhm.
sounds like we've got a plan for kind of conducting.
Or something, let's find out when the date is, who can make it. We have some interest, but it really depends on timing. Is that the
Yeah.
general? Okay.
Sounds good.
Let's see.
Is mounting study update quick?
Sorry.
Mounting study update?
Ledge disruption?
Mounting study?
Mounting study update?
Oh, I have,
Sorry.
yes, sorry, mounting study. That would be me, darn. I did send off our list of issues for the report. I wasn't specific because I really wanted him to explain it, so I just mentioned the issues and
Yep.
what we'd like to see, and he thought he would have that
No problem.
within a couple of weeks, I think he
Okay,
said, something
good.
like that. So,
Sounds good.
but I said, initially I said within a month, so.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
And how about ledge disruption? Any updates on,
So I have a meeting tomorrow morning in New Hampshire in
okay.
Concord with the coordinator of ledges and disruption thereof. He's already sent me, as I mentioned at the last meeting, a couple hundred pages of stuff, which I've partially digested. And we'll see where it goes from there. But he seems to be very eager to help, and we'll see
great.
where he steers me from there.
okay. I tripped across something on the MIT.edu site,
Really?
environmental risks of mining.
Oh, well,
And I thought that might have something, because they were talking about, right, movement of materials and that sort of thing, so.
it's kind of different, though. I mean, it depends on what they're mining. I mean, I've done.
No, I mean, right, there's a lot of stuff,
tailings are
especially if you're
pretty
using
different.
chemicals to extract, dissolve things out of
Yeah.
rock, but
Yeah.
you never know, so. I figured you probably
Okay.
know your way around the MIT
do.
website in general, so, okay. Anything else on that right now? Although I do have, in connection with the regulatory update discussion, I have something about ledge I want to bring up for that. But background, okay, so, all right, so I passed out, where did I put it? Some
Yeah, where is this
pages
from?
on, oh, here. It starts
She
with
prepared it.
cesspools. No, wait a minute, doesn't start, that ends with cesspools.
Ledge disruption.
Ledge disruption.
Yeah, where's that from? You're
From
about
me,
to tell
I
us.
wrote it up.
It created it.
Oh, great.
So really, I didn't get to go back and try and make any changes to the ledge disruption from what I had put forth before. I was hoping to, based on some of our other discussions, but, and I have a few topics here. I didn't get to all the ones I thought would be good to have for that, and I was hoping they were easier topics to maybe have for a public hearing in the near term to make some regulatory updates. The ledge disruption, I like the other things that we've been talking about what kind of testing would be done, what would be done by the proponent of a project who is going to be doing the ledge disruption, how far would that range, what would be the follow-up depending on what the results were, both pre and then post, and how do you determine what are kind of action triggers in that, in terms of what's found or not found. But my concern is that that's going to take us some time to figure out and get that kind of detail. And I was hoping if we could just at least let people know to please be aware that this is coming and there are risks associated. And I don't know if you agree, but I was thinking that might be something easier for us to do in the near term. And then we can embellish it as time goes on, and David does all the mountain of research ahead of him to get more details on stuff. So that was kind of one thought. So this really hasn't changed from before. But then I was also thinking about, it seemed that this would be best under the groundwater protection bylaw, given the way it's written now. And then I had the dark and italics, I think, are phrases I had added to that bylaw, which is kind of long, but
For the certain types of surface, can we say may also impact groundwater?
Okay.
And also, I don't like the word limiting it to surface, because a lot of times the ledge itself is it can be a
okay.
couple feet down.
So surface and subsurface?
Yeah, or rock,
Yeah.
rock disruption or ledge disruption. I mean,
Some places also talk about even disrupting the soil.
yeah, but.
What about surface, subsurface,
Disrupting
and
surface
rock
soil is
disruption?
not going to be impacting someone's bedrock well. I mean, that's different, because it's not a hard material that's going to require that kind of blasting. I mean, people grade dirt all the time. I don't want to be too encompassing. in
All right,
that.
how about bedrock/ledge?
Yeah, that's better.
What about surface, subsurface, and
Well,
ledge?
Why don't we just say bedrock or ledge? I mean, because that's really what we're talking
Yeah.
about here.
Okay.
I think that
I think keep it,
encompasses it.
managing the scope, I think.
I
is a
agree,
good-
bedrock and
Yeah,
ledge
okay.
makes
Yeah.
sense.
Then the other point, though, to do that town bylaw change,
Yeah.
that's town meeting, that's getting everybody on board, it's really spending a lot of time going to other committees to discuss it. So, and I haven't figured getting through this, but I think under nuisance regulations,
We can bypass.
because it changes the quality of water and taste and
Yeah, I think
appearance,
that would certainly
and that
impact
that
the
may
Nichols
be
property.
right where we could bring it back
Yeah.
to us, because
Yeah.
we were
think that's
almost going
reasonable.
down this bylaw because one, it potentially fit there, but also there was the issue of it might be the building inspector who would be the person to hear about this, or some other department who would hear about ledge disruption potentially before we would, and they might be issuing permits, especially if there were blasting agents. But, again, that might be for the next wave. The first wave could just be to make sure people know, because we've got some things on the horizon that
Right.
are happening, maybe happening soon,
Right.
and there's going to be this whole set of people who don't know. So anyway, so that
I
was
think that's a great idea.
that
Yeah.
kind of general
So I feel
thought.
That, David,
I mean, I think that,
accomplishes the goal.
Yeah.
So should we
It
write
identifies
little
a
notes
risk.
and then give them back to you?
Yeah. Or bring them to the next meeting or
Okay.
something like that. So, and I'll,
Could we give them to Ellen so she can compile them so that we have a sort
yeah.
of compiled, updated document?
Like a
Yeah.
red
That
line?
Just because it avoids any open meeting stuff with us communicating with each other, that you could say if Lisa passed something to me and I pass it to you, we start to get into trickier territory, whereas
Right.
if we all give edits to Ellen, those are compiled and then considered. I
Can
think.
you-
everybody could just see everybody's edits.
Could you
Maybe
send,
just strictly sending it on,
Oh,
not you
okay,
having
yeah,
to
'cause I was saying,
decide.
how am I,
Oh, they
yeah.
changed
You're
the
gonna pick your
sentence
Yeah,
this way, they
right.
changed it that
Can
way.
you-
Your favorite.
can you send a Word version though? Because my handwriting's
Yeah,
really
Word is
bad.
much
Yeah.
preferred.
Because then we could each redline it and then
All
send it
right,
to
so
you.
did you keep a?
Yeah, I kept a
Okay,
copy.
so Ellen has a copy, she could send this out. But
Okay.
again, just remember, I didn't touch anything from our, this is
We
from
just
long
added the
ago.
bulk.
Yeah.
And crossed
So-
out one and.
And I had the rough draft of the notification letter, but that could come later, because that's not a regulatory, that's maybe
No, and
the-
that's just
the
providing
tool
a
about saying
helpful-
this is,
right.
you must include this or something very much like this in your letter, that kind of thing. All right, so there's that one. Then we have the additional wells,
Yay,
and
my pet project.
I looked around for kind of language to borrow, but I wasn't finding anything for the limited time I had to do the research. So here's just a first stab at it.
This one looked pretty good for me. The only question I have is when we say one well per property, what makes a property a property? Is it a parcel? Is
Yeah.
it?
I had that, I didn't know how to word
Yeah.
that either, because if people have a large property that's made up of individual parcels,
Yeah.
then are we getting into that kind of,
How about one well
Exactly.
per
Dwelling.
residential dwelling or something?
yeah,
Okay.
right, and that's kind of why I had
Then,
property or dwelling, I
Yeah.
wasn't sure which way to go with that.
Do we have
Well-
any scenario where people put wells on properties without a dwelling? Like, is there any kind of agricultural application or
Got
something
one coming
else?
in right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We have one that
Barns.
someone took a house down, then abandoned their well, and now they want their well back on that empty lot, so.
What, isn't there a barn?
There's a barn.
But not a residence,
Yeah,
Mm.
bars.
unless you're a horse or
On the
sheep,
property.
alpaca.
Prospect.
Okay.
Wonder if we should,
Just didn't want the
considering that many of our select people are attorneys, I wonder if they could come up with a good terminology that's appropriate for this. I have someone in mind.
But the rest of it seemed,
Yeah.
that was my only question. The rest of the regulation seemed kind of broadly.
So for
Right,
the
I mean, we need to-
multi-dwelling projects, you're talking about like cluster housing or?
I mean, the Abbey has
Right,
5 wells,
right.
4 or 5 wells, something like that, so. But they applied, they did studies,
no,
they,
right.
you know, went through, they justified it. It was a bunch of units, sharing wells, it was a different situation. I thought maybe agricultural, but
No.
again, it says that it would
We
be
just allowed,
up to
agri-
us to approve or
Right,
not
right,
approve.
so that's just, exactly. It doesn't say that we have nothing capable of rejecting it. It's
Yeah.
saying that if you really, really want to put in an agricultural irrigation well, come talk to us and we'll decide.
Is it
what about,
true
what
food
about the
supply?
new zoning that allows like apartments? Does that mean that they get to have another well because they have an apartment in there? It's a dwelling.
I think we'd have to say.
Well, if we
you'd have
say
to-
multi-dwelling
Yeah.
projects
I think
or
we need to come up
properties.
with a board
Single
to
dwelling.
consider.
Well, that's why we said only one well per,
Single dwelling? No, we don't
per,
want
So for something like the, not considering this property specifically, but something like the property, the 195 Western, just as an example, not as their actual well, but like you've got the main house and then you also have the caretaker house. So that then be, one well would need to service both dwellings, or that would be one where you'd say, like if I have a 20-acre lot or something large.
but
you
that's a
could-
there's multiple
Right.
dwellings on that property. So
we'd
if
then
they
say,
needed to
we
have
could
an
do
extra,
it, but you
yeah.
need to come
Yeah,
kind of
talk to us.
articulate that so we can
Yeah.
think about it and provide
Yeah.
appropriate oversight.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
that makes
actually,
sense.
maybe the language we could borrow is from our other stuff that says, section, what is it, 3?
Or the
Or
septics.
something other than a single-family home on a single property. So if we just say that only one well per single-family home on single property, and maybe single property means multiple parcels altogether, and it
Or
just
single.
means
Says on
one home,
one-
and then after that, it's,
It
One lot,
defines
yeah.
it as one lot here. I was looking that up as you were asking.
oh, okay.
But a lot can be composed of different parcels, like, so we shouldn't
Okay,
get
so,
so hung up on that, because you can have a property composed of several tax lots or parcels, but it's still one address and one,
Yeah.
house,
So whatever the way to express that would be, maybe the way to do that here. But anyway, so we don't have to do this all tonight
Yeah, I
if you want to
think
hit
doing
the
it
early
dwelling
target, but
makes
just
sense.
Or could we ask
generally,
planning board, or like zoning board to
Oh,
just kind of
yeah.
say like, how would you define this?
express this, yeah.
Right.
ooh,
'Cause that
zoning
might-
board.
To just kind of say, what's the
Appeals would be
best
great.
descriptor?
Yep.
So that we're consistent with the language that they use, because
Okay.
that's, I think, our intent is to line up with that.
Sure,
Uh-huh.
that's that.
Okay,
And Darrell, under number 7 of our well regs, it says there shall be a separate well for each house. So it says lot in one area, house in another area, so
okay,
you
so that
kind of
might
hit it.
be,
Property and dwelling is kind
Yeah.
of like lot and house.
yeah.
Kind of hit it.
All right, so I have to add that to things Beth needs to look for. It's the use of, let's see.
And then you also had info on cesspools. Is this because we don't feel our current regulations adequately address
Yeah,
cesspools?
hold on one second, lot, property.
What about senior citizens?
Okay, so for many years, I've been seeing that
Bullet.
other towns in the state, other states, and I've listed some things here that, where cesspools are usually, I just remember being
Oh, yeah.
struck by reading about other towns in Massachusetts that as soon as a cesspool was found, they're like, no, you've
Done.
gotta
Yeah.
got to get rid of that. And I always wondered why we didn't do that here. So I did look around just to see what other folks were doing, and certainly no one thinks that cesspools are good. And in particular, let's see, in the middle of the page where I call Approach A,
From Dover?
yeah, Dover.
Yeah, this is kind of surprising.
So Dover says, no, absolutely not, and you have to basically replace it immediately there when it's identified. But there are, so then I have something from Rhode Island, so that's immediate replacement. You know about it, you fix it and upgrade it. Rhode Island has more of a stepped thing of different circumstances on how fast you make people do it. And, I don't necessarily like the idea of it being drawn out, but, for example, what if it's a senior citizen who's in a home who can't afford to upgrade it? Then the property transfer time becomes kind of a good time to do it, because then there's presumably some funds that become available and
Well, this says within
can be-
1 year of the closing date. I thought in our regs, if you fail Title V, you have to fix it before you transact.
Actually, 2 years. Title V. It doesn't usually happen. I've only seen it happen maybe once or
You mean that it
twice.
doesn't happen prior to the transaction?
What happens, the banks won't allow the...
Well, exactly. They're
voluntary
not going to get the
issue.
financing.
The only
Right,
time I've seen it
and-
happen is a cash sale. That's...
Okay, well, that's,
chance.
And I almost don't like the 1 year of the closing date, because there was one example in town where there was an agreement between the buyer and seller to do it,
Yep.
and then they never did it. And then it got found out in connection with just something completely different later on. It blew up. It was an embarrassment, I think, for the lawyer, perhaps, this is just my personal opinion, who misguided their client, and then that turned on the Board of Health, and what we were doing was wrong. It was pretty bad. So,
so you're saying you don't like the within 1 year?
because there's no way to follow up and know
Disclosure.
that it's been done.
Right.
Or not easily.
Yeah, those, we don't know about those. We
Right.
don't know about any sale.
Right,
Unless
so-
it's just disclosed in the assessor's
Right, or
office.
even if it's not, if it's done beforehand, I guess, that's hard to know too, except that we see the plans that come in, but, I don't know. But, so this was language, I mean, I adjusted a little because it kept referring to things in the state there. Like coastal waters, that is not really an issue here in Sherborn yet, so,
First one I find interesting, your miscellaneous information, that in California, they're looking at saturated soils as well
yeah.
for distances.
And how about 10 feet
Unsaturated.
separation? I thought that was, that
Just-
didn't,
But that's also, it's a seepage pit. It's like a
True.
lagoon. It's not even a septic, like
Oh, I
a
understand,
design.
but
It's an outhouse with no house.
Yeah, it's basically like what my clients have at Superfund sites. Like, no, 10 feet, it's not.
yeah.
Well, in California too, remember, their water is really deep. It's nothing like
Yeah.
the water tables around here, where you can have water expressed at the surface or within 3 feet. That's not what California is. So they have a very different hydrogeological setting.
Well, also
Just a
there,
little, go ahead, Darryl, I was just
I
going
was
to
going
give
to
it.
say there are some seepage pits, though, in areas with very clay soil where they don't put stuff underground, because why bother? So you're counting on aerobic at the surface to take care of stuff, so then there's that.
And the state, in their ultimate wisdom, decided not to ban cesspools. Originally in 1992-93, when they had the committee to discuss the 1995 Title V changes, they were going to ban cesspools, but I believe it was at the DCU Center or somewhere in Worcester, they were overpacked with people in there saying, you can't do this to us, it's going to be a financial burden. So the state changed their process on how to evaluate a cesspool under the Title V inspection process. But originally, the state was planning to ban all cesspools at the time of inspection. But there was an outcry, and they followed the outcry.
The thing is, for approach A, it sounds great on paper,
Yeah.
but how are they going to know what properties have it? Are they going through everybody's residential file and doing it? So I think
think
it's,
it's just like when
Be
the
a
house-
Title V.
So,
yeah, but so why not be
Or building.
specific about, like, that? That's why I like be better, because it sets out clear, like, if you're doing a property transfer, you have to evaluate if there's a septic, or, I mean, a cesspool, and if there is one, I think going with the Suffolk County, the New Jersey, at the time of the transfer, it has to be fixed, because I don't like the 1 year either, because I
Okay.
don't trust disclosure. But I kind of like it when you're clearly saying, here's all the times you have to look for it, and if you find it, it's, a trigger.
I personally agree with all this for the reasons that you kind of outlined. What I struggle with is, let's say that 10% or 5% or whatever the percentage of Sherborn is that has cesspools, we are invoking this as a failure criteria for them in a way that Title V isn't. And so if you say my house currently, my house doesn't, but if
I
my
thought
house.
it does.
But
I
like,
thought-
is it an automatic failure now for Title V?
Well,
It is not. You can
So like,
actually.
so you could sort of
But
say
it
you're
almost-
taking $40,000
almost
out of the
always
value of
is
my
so.
house. Because if I have a cesspool now and you're saying all cesspools fail, then you're saying every Sherborn, I don't disagree with the rationale.
But
I
there's
just think
probably
that's-
fewer than literally 5% that actually meet Title V. So in all effects, even though Title V doesn't
Okay.
officially ban it, none of them meet the
Meet,
Title
okay.
V performance criteria. So it's a kind of, you might feel good about it, but it's in name only. So
Okay.
I don't really
So
think it
so we actually
functionally
think that-
changes.
And so we're creating this regulation, and those 95%
Clarifying.
that would fail Title V would
Anyway,
fail this, will fail that, but it's sort of
Yeah.
transparent going into the Title V inspection that you know you have a cesspit. The small percentage that might be compliant with Title V, we're making the assertion that in the setting of our sort of unique water and septic resources,
It's
we
still
can't
bad.
afford that risk. And that's sort of the judgment, and that seems like it's well supported by the data and the preponderance and regulations in other similar systems that say one town over, whereas you made the point before, Rebecca, their water risk is lower, they've outright said it's a failure. And we look at other states joining us and they said it's a failure. So it doesn't feel like Sherborn's going out on a limb to say, we also think of it as a failure for the tiny percentage that don't already fail Title V.
right, and the language in Dover is quite strong. This just
Yeah.
isn't it isn't
There
serving
had to be
the
some
public
current
health.
circumstances.
New Jersey seems to have a very
But,
simple, easy answer. Have a
but-
transfer.
That's why, that's why I like some of just the definitions up above, that just sets the stage without saying, right, as you're pointing
Yeah.
out, you have a failed system, you shouldn't be continuing, where it says, largely untreated liquid passively leaches out of the gravel into the soil. I mean, and that's
that's
the
a
point, is
particular
that
risk
it's
for
not
us with
doing
shallow.
much other than getting it underground, away from kids playing in the puddles, and that's about
But with the
it.
sort of shallow groundwater here, that's a particular issue because the likelihood
Right.
that you're seeping directly into groundwater is fairly high.
Or really close to groundwater.
Yeah.
Even if you're not in it, it's close enough that it's gonna stay wet,
Right, if
nothing's
you-
getting
if you
treated,
leach 3
nothing's
feet,
happening.
Totally untreated stuff,
Yeah, so,
And-
So what do we need to do to
just-
operationalize this? Do we want to like pull the Cape Cod definition, pull the real property transfer, separate it out from the 1 year restriction? Because I think all of us would say this should happen at the time of property transfer, not at some.
yeah, time in the future, okay.
What you'll find interesting too in Massachusetts, if someone had a cesspool and put an additional leaching line off it for relief, they will then consider that a conventional septic system. The cesspool will be considered the tank,
Oh,
and the
interesting.
leaching line will be considered a leaching field. So they did that as well. So there's where an old cesspool may be considered a tank with a leaching line.
So
Wait,
for,
did they allow that, or they
They allow
stopped
it,
that?
as long
It's
as it
still
meets.
allowed?
As long as it
All
meets.
right, then I would want to change that, because
Yeah.
if its
Oh,
function is
I-
stuff goes
why I
in and
mentioned
flows
it.
out.
That's why I mentioned it. Even though it's not tight, they consider that the tank portion of the Title V inspection. And the line is considered leaching side of it. So there are a lot of antiquated type
All
septic
right, so
systems
then we
out
need
there.
something that says you
But-
can't just have a cesspool or whatever
But why-
with
how-
a field connected to it.
how does that, just for, like, as a non-expert in this piece of it, like, how does, like, my tank doesn't treat anything, does it? Is it
Your
my tank?
If your tank is a
It's not
true
porous.
tank, If
Yeah.
it's-
Porous.
Right, so if I have a
Yeah, it's
conventional tank,
impermeable.
1,500-gallon tank, is the
You have
idea
a tank
that,
in front of a,
is that there's biological treatment happening within the tank? partially?
yes, there's
Okay.
digestion, it's a digestive
And so
tank.
the idea here is that because this is not tight, you're not having treatment, so the
Just
fact,
goes right out.
it's not a
into the
tank.
ground.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
it's basically a lagoon.
But just
It's
realize.
an outhouse with no house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What the board did allow, because Title V wasn't around yet in the 1980s, I know it happened when I was here too, they used to allow septic tanks to go prior to a cesspool. And that would be
So put a
considered,
tank in like a train and
Which-
then a cesspool.
because a previous board member felt that was better than having a cesspool. That would be considered a conventional system, septic tank leaching area.
Okay.
Conventional is always a septic, non-porous tank and a leaching field. Non-conventional, you get cesspools that are called tanks by the state, but they're truly not. But that's how they went around all
But we
this.
want to sort of
There's a
define
lot of-
tank as a
Yeah.
non-porous
Okay.
vessel,
Yeah,
and that wouldn't affect any, if we define a tank as a non-porous vessel, there are no IA technologies or other things that will break their definition of tank.
that I know of, they're all non-porous,
Okay.
plastic, concrete, whatever it may be.
Containment.
Containment, contained, non-porous, solid, you
So-
could use various words.
So I kind of missed it. Is the state allowing a tank and then a cesspool is still okay?
And they're calling it a conventional septic
Oh,
system.
all right. Do we
Well-
have to go along with that? That
Well,
seems-
you can change your regulations, you can increase your regulations, and obviously you need the state to approve it too, but again, they were going along the same routes we are tonight, but they had the outcry, and they had to figure out a way to get around it, so.
Make it less
they-
costly. So then that would still tie to property transfer. I also put in 2, that was not in Rhode Island's.
I like that,
Just said if it was a building permit
Yeah.
or some big project that.
yeah.
But I think it has to be a big project.
That it
Like, it shouldn't be
implies
like,
that-
like
deck.
we're replacing a gas
Mailbox?
stove, we're gonna need some
Yeah.
kind of building permit. And so that doesn't seem like that should trigger like, you're replacing your gas
septic
stove, you
system.
need to put in a new septic system. Like, I think there needs to be some threshold of not just, because we have a pretty,
We can look at our flow chart and figure
Yeah.
out where to put that in,
Yeah.
because obviously a deck, a porch, a shed,
Well, you're not going to be getting a
Additional room.
certificate of occupancy for those things either. So those are not going to be captured. It's really, the one thing I'm thinking of is,
What about the $300,000 remodel or something?
well, but
Does that
that's,
change the occupancy?
well, they
You know,
wouldn't get a certificate of, well, they would get a final, I don't know what the building, that's a good
Yeah.
question. I don't know if the building inspector would issue a CO. I know there is.
because if it's already an occupied dwelling, it's
Right.
not a new,
Have to ask Chris that.
I mean, I think there's a piece that we've got
some
limitations,
threshold.
like if you're gonna say I'm adding like if I'm going from a 3-bedroom house by the Board of Sherborn House count to a 4-bedroom house, that would certainly seem like it would trigger.
how about have the property subject to sale or transfer? Maybe the building permit would have to be for expansion of
Like,
an
would it
occupied
be like
dwelling,
adding
occupied.
a bedroom, or do they
A lot
already
of
not?
that is already included, though, in the flow chart.
Yeah, in the
If
flow-
you're adding a bedroom, or you have to
Yeah, you have
pretty
to
much
update the
upgrade the
system.
septic,
Yeah,
so.
But for me, like, the bedroom makes more sense than like if somebody's like,
Yeah,
I'm
no.
just putting an absurd amount of money into my house, but I'm not
No.
actually changing its pattern of use.
and you wouldn't
then
need
I
a
wouldn't trigger
COO
it.
either, though,
Yeah.
so like, I think that's fine. I think we could be more specific about if you're expanding
By some percentage.
by, you know,
Well, say
Except some of the
50%,
arguments
you know.
against replacing a cesspool or something like that, something with a cesspool component, is that if people can't afford it at the time.
Well,
But
then
that's
they
where-
couldn't be expanding their house either. If they
If you're doing some
can,
magnificent renovation, though, but if you're just doing a renovation that doesn't trigger a CO, maybe.
But that sort of feels
Yeah.
like our judgment about like what, like I don't think it's our place. It sort of feels like there's a piece that we're like, if you have the money to do this, you have the money to do that. But if I'm the homeowner, I could say, upgrading my cesspool doesn't solve X, Y, Z problem. Like maybe I'm saying I'm converting this space where I've got my room count to now be occupancy for my elder parents, or whatever. Like there are lots of things you could do, or like I'm adding a barn to the property.
well, that,
Yes, I've got barn money, but I don't want to spend $40,000 on my cesspool. And you guys are making the assertion that if I have the money for a barn, I should do this, but it's my money and it's none of your business.
No, it's if you needed to expand the system anyway, though. So if you're
Right.
going into the situation where your current system isn't sufficient, so let's say you are adding an
Yeah.
addition to your house. So now your current whatever you have isn't sufficient, right? So
Well,
you'd
then
have
it just wouldn't be sufficient. I think if you
So they'd
had
have to fix it
documentation
anyway.
that said,
They'd have
I
to-
had a 4-bedroom house with the cesspool,
Yeah,
and I'm reconfiguring, adding on, making bigger, and
Yeah.
it's still a 4-bedroom house. Something like that, right?
You would-
Yes.
DEP gave us guidance
You
that
would
if it,
still need to upgrade, I think. I think the only thing that the board has allowed with the cesspool for a build is cosmetic,
or decks or
Yeah.
things like
Right.
that, you know.
but
Definitely.
nothing,
Or like a shed,
no,
I mean.
no reconfiguring the rooms
What about
or
barn?
anything.
Like,
I don't,
I think
I think we
that's
need to
new
use another
construction.
number,
Yeah.
40,000, because that's not how much all septic systems
Yeah.
cost. So
Right.
it just
But-
sounds
but
too
like-
big a percentage,
Yeah.
perhaps. You know, some may be that much, but not every.
no,
will
no, I
be.
was playing
Some-
that based on
Yeah.
no data. But
Okay. All right,
look
so
at
a little
50%
tricky on the
too.
trigger because, yeah, right, and what the relief is, right? The relief of.
But what's going to make people look
transfer
to, if you're not doing a sale, which I think is very straightforward,
Yeah.
you're always going to
Yeah.
have to do the
But it sounds
inspection.
like we're all on the same page. Sale, we all agree
Yeah,
on.
and make it happen at the time of the sale,
Yep.
like not a
Not
year
a
or
year
two
later,
later.
yeah.
Okay. But how, if Joe Schmo has just an old house and it has a shitty cesspool and it's in failure, but they're not selling their house, there's nothing driving them to inspect and understand that they have a crappy cesspool that's in failure that could
Yeah.
be impacting their
Right.
neighbors, right?
Yeah.
So there is no
And I
trigger.
Think, and I think I'm okay with that because you're just sort of like, look, you are living in the house that you've lived in that's current state.
Yeah.
Like, I'd love to get you to change it, but I totally get that you may not have the cost to change it. You're not making an ask. There's, you sort of say, how would I enforce if it's like you are doing nothing and all of a sudden I'm going in and saying, hey, you have to upgrade your system. Like, if I'm the homeowner, I'd say, why? Like, I
Right.
get this in failure. But I
So
don't
how are
know.
we gonna,
That's
h-
how I
how
enforce
about, so how's 3 like enforceable outside of, I mean, like I don't wanna make regs that aren't enforceable.
Totally agree. I don't know if 3 is in, yeah.
I'd suggest
I think if
take
there's a
3
Title
out.
Yeah.
5
I don't
thing
think 3 is
submitted.
going to work.
Yeah, because the only reason you're gonna know is if you're hitting one of these other criteria.
Or, well, if it's in failure where you flush the toilet and it doesn't flush or stuff backs
But
up into
isn't it
your
also true
basement
that
or
we
something
basically
else,
feel a
but-
cesspool is by definition failed?
Yeah.
So
And
I do think
it's
that
proven
it
out.
is, right.
then
So-
that makes 3 even less workable because all of them are already failed by definition. So,
And so 3
Can
gets
I-
hard because you're saying I have to replace every cesspool within a year from now.
Right.
Because I'm concerned them failed.
and that'll cause big problems for some people. I'm real sensitive to the elderly problem
Yeah, no,
because
right.
that's the situation my mother was in with the house I live in now. And she was never going to spend $50,000
Right.
to replace the cesspool until it got sold.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent the $50,000.
I mean, our house is-
I think 4 is, I think when you're getting to multifamily,
Okay,
non-residential,
yeah,
I think
no,
that's
I
all
would
fair
not.
game too. Although, I kind of feel like that should have been looked at again before.
Oh, you could always follow Title V requirements, but again, I think number 3, what they were trying to say is a porous pit or porous tank. Because remember, a cesspool becomes a tank by definition if it has a leach line or a relief line off it. And so this is Rhode Island, I understand, but Massachusetts would allow a cesspool to be be a tank.
I
And
think
it
we're
would be a
saying
porous
tank
tank.
has to be
It's,
known.
that's
Do you
not
think
the
there are any
problem
of
with
those
that
in the
one.
town?
Yeah, there's plenty of them. But what happened in the 50s, that was the way to repair a septic is to, expansion of showering and all that. They put an extra leach line right off the cesspool. But I would say if we follow Title V regulations and just reword it that when you do your Title V inspection for a sale, if you have a porous tank, you can't call it a conventional system. It's a cesspool still.
Well, I think we capture that with 1, and we say the property subject to sale, transfer,
No, but-
the porous pit or tank.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
must be removed from service.
And I
We're
would-
going to say at the time
Must,
of transaction.
yeah, be not removed, but keep to the Title V requirements of 2 years.
No, we don't like that.
Well, but it's required, the state requires that, and what it does,
I want it at the
happens
time of
autom-
sale.
Well, it happens automatically usually because the banks won't allow you.
I know, but what's
Sys-
wrong with us just saying
Well,
that?
the system fails at that time. You show, the system fails and has to be replaced for Title V requirements.
But right, but we're saying, why not make it be required to be fixed at the time of the sale? Because what Daryl is saying, and I've seen this in other kinds of similar situations, is if you rely on the fact like, oh, this has to be done within 2 years, so new owner, it's on you to get it done. What's the mechanism for us to actually make sure
There is
that it gets
someone.
done? So then it just doesn't happen.
Right.
Or someone says, well, nobody told me that.
Yeah.
That wasn't in my closing
Right.
documents. We don't want to be in the middle of that. We just want to say, it has to be done at the time of the transaction. I don't care who pays for it. Maybe the buyer will end up paying for it, or
Right.
they'll take the money off the sales price. I don't care.
Yeah,
But just get it done.
The only thing though is will the state approve it?
Yeah.
It-
Well, why does this?
In the past 2 months, I've gotten 2 calls from Title V inspectors. They've said they're Title V inspectors. I don't know who they were, and I can't ask. But both of them asked, it may have been the same one if he didn't think I
his
gave the
brother
right
called.
answer the first time, I don't know.
This time I've a Russian accent.
But he asked if a cesspool, will that pass a Title V inspection in Sherborn? And I said, yes, it will. Right now, it did. And he was shocked. He said, it will?
Yeah, we need
Yeah.
something on the
So
book.
if
It
it
will.
failed, then
And
you-
so a lot of towns,
Take back what I
It-
said about
and then
cesspools being filled
they
by
just-
definition. That's not
I mean,
true.
all I had to say is, yes, that's a failure, but right now it isn't.
No,
And
I
then
think we need that on
I
the
do think,
books.
though, the changing the timing, because Title V right now allows
Other
2
systems.
years to be fixed, to track cesspools and try to track a year. For the most
It's just not
part,
going to happen.
for the most part, every failed system
it's done.
gets fixed
Yeah. But
right
if somebody
away.
were a cash buyer, they could say.
Oh,
I'm not
yeah, then
fixing
we
it.
don't
Like,
even
again,
get a
it's like-
Title V.
But like you
Yeah,
could have,
but-
so if you had like the intra-family transfer, where it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
my mom sells me
Yeah.
a house for $1,
Yep,
then I could say, great,
yeah,
I'm all set,
yep,
I
Yeah.
failed.
yep.
Yeah, but if we had it on the books so
How do you-
that
That's a
I guess if we have a
transaction.
total ban like Dover does, then they would technically be non-compliant and they could be fined if we,
Right, but it's still
How do you
property
fine them?
transfer,
I like
so-
But how
Dover.
do you
Dover's
find
makes
them?
sense.
maybe I'm
Yeah.
going full circle
Dover
here.
sandwiches into Title V requirements.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe.
That's why they did it that way.
Yeah,
Because
it's too
then-
unique.
So then, when you have the inspection
Well, you'd
before a
still would, and they would
transaction,
feel
if
it.
you have a cesspool, it's game over. It doesn't matter.
Well, it's automatic failure, so they have to still do the Title V inspection per state code, but it becomes an automatic failure.
Well, no, I get that. So
And-
maybe that takes care of it. Is
Yeah.
I think Dover has the
It
best
really
approach.
would.
I really do.
All right. Fine.
I agree with Mark. I like
Okay.
the Dover approach because
Alright.
it's clean, it's simple.
Yeah.
Okay,
Um,
that's
The
good.
the one thing, though, is that you could put a waiver in for seniors, right? Of course, you have to define what a senior is, but it's a hardship if you're 60 or 70 or
Why
80.
not just say if there's a financial hardship?
Well, and you have to define what that is.
Well, with
It's
our
hard
tax, there's a tax relief thing in
Yeah.
town already.
That
for-
defines
Be
what
addressed
financial
separately
hardship
or
Yeah.
is.
something.
Yeah, I mean, we
Is
don't.
anyone going to find their cesspool? Or is it going to come up outside of a property
I don't
transfer?
think so.
Unless it is backing up,
Poop in your yard.
seeping into the neighbor's yard.
Yeah.
There's a
And
complaint.
I don't think that
Be a
we,
complaint, if there's a complaint.
That would be of
that's
any
needed
system.
fine.
and I don't think
Yeah.
we've
There are
looked,
people,
the board, has the board ever said, oh, it's
Yeah, we had
failing
one-
and it's
we had
breakout,
them
but
doing
you
it
don't
on-
have to replace it
Oh,
because
no, they
your
had to replace
financial
Hunting
hardship
Lane.
show?
Yeah,
So if it's,
never financial, it's always public.
you know, I don't know if we
Public health.
amend this to link it to either an outright
I think,
demonstrable failure,
let's just do A.
I
Let's just
agree
do
with A, but I
Yeah.
would argue for adding the financial hardship provision onto it.
There is a betterment that is allowed in low interest rate loans through Title V for a failure. So say if an elderly person had a failed cesspool above ground sewage, we didn't know it except for that, they could acquire a low interest under 5% or less loan through the state. And right now, the various banks still offer it. It's for lead paint, failed septic systems, and I believe sewer connections. So that is there in the books. We don't see it too often, but it's there.
But it's still a loan, it's still money, it's still.
Yeah, but it's
So-
20 years at 5% or less, and
But we get back to the only time they're going to know about this is if they're selling their property, and so then that,
Or if, right.
or if it's an imminent
That's what's a little
threat.
more nebulous
If it's
here
an
is
imminent threat, though, it's just got to be dealt with.
Their presence is, so what if we pull out the wrong file for something, for a project we're about to review, and whatever file gets pulled, it notes that it has a cesspool, then do we have to
we don't.
go out and pursue it? So that would be the one thing, how do
You know where
you
Dover-
determine when
yeah.
this gets triggered?
What-
And
what about
then,
Dover?
I think what we could solve, their presence is considered an automatic failure criterion as noted in the Title V inspection. And that will solve that. I think that's what they were meaning to say anyways, because it's all part of that Title V inspection.
okay,
not
so
gonna
maybe
get
tie a
unless you're
Title
selling your
V.
property.
Transfer.
That's right.
Yeah.
So you're saying an elderly person who is going to stay there till they die would never run into this?
Probably not,
until-
unless there was an imminent danger,
Imminent
in which case it
public
just needs to be
health
dealt
threat.
with,
Yeah.
and,
I mean, I think the other stuff
Okay.
you could run into, just that, like, kind of in thinking about that, is you also have people who say, like, it may not be until you die, it may be until you're in a nursing home or going to that, and then that involves lots of kind of, so most nursing homes are paid for by Medicaid, you have to spend on your assets, which means you have to sell your home, and so.
so you're still having a transaction.
Right, you're still having a transaction.
Yeah, I think it's fine to link it to the
All right.
Title V inspection, and
I agree.
No, I think that
the
takes
number-
care of
I
that
agree.
obligation. It also pulls out the issue of if it fails, obviously, we can't say, oh, fine, keep using it,
Yeah,
right?
no.
So whatever the hardship is, I don't think that we can completely overlook it, so it takes care of that.
Yeah,
So maybe that is, okay.
because that's saying your financial hardship is worth more than
Public
your
health.
abutter's
Yeah.
safety and
Right.
health, so we
Right.
can't we can't
Right,
say that.
I agree.
Okay.
Okay, I go with it.
And there are methods to help them. There are, if they need help.
Okay. All right.
Okay, done.
I had another question from
Oh, sure,
someone
okay.
who was buying a house with a failed Title V. And she said, can that house be occupied? Can we move in?
Yep,
And I-
2 years.
Yeah,
Oh.
they have 2 years. I said, yes.
Unless they have
You-
above ground sewage.
And that's exactly what I said.
Back up into
That's
the house.
exactly what I told them.
They're well
As I
versed.
said,
She knows her stuff.
yes, that you can move in, but if the sewage comes above ground and there's,
Break out.
it's backing up into your house, then no, you wouldn't, it would have to be.
Yeah.
But until that time, unless and until.
And what,
But
It
again,
has to
what
be
bank would
repaired
lend them
in
the
2
money?
years.
no, but you said there's no lend, then you just say something.
But we had a
people buy-
Title V
That's in
inspection
cash.
report, so.
If you have enough
No.
cash to buy a house in
Yeah.
Sherborn as cash,
Then fix the
how do you
toilet.
not have enough cash to put in a $30,000 septic system?
For the water that you're going to be drinking.
I know.
Right.
It just
There might
doesn't
be
make
some
any sense.
leftover.
I know, I'm gonna, that's just crazy. People are so.
And what's it,
And they'll pay.
but there's then no enforcement, so if they move in and they've got a failed Title V, and we say it's 2 years, but then nothing happens in 2 years and there's no enforcement mechanism in 2
Beat that
years.
horse to
Well, we have it, it's in a logbook, so I do see.
But then what do we do?
Well, I tell Mark, and Mark could send an order. He would bring it
Still
to you.
4 to- no, it's 4 to 1.
Probably It would be ordered.
It's on the record.
So in terms of the cesspool piece, what do we need to do as next steps?
Are we gonna send our edits to Ellen and then?
Yeah.
Send edits, but then is it, like we've talked about it, so this seems like so the ledge we're addending the nuisance regulation. is a cesspool its own independent regulation that we need a public hearing
Yeah,
for?
no, yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know how, or where, I didn't look at where that would fit in just
Yeah,
yet.
that's what you'd have to.
So we have to
I
get
think
public
that a
comment?
regulation would be better.
Well, we would
Well,
have.
eventually, but
We
you
have to come up with
an
as
exact,
clean
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, right.
thing, so that, and then we announce
post
it in the
it.
paper, and then, so that's a couple
And
months.
same for the irrigation wells, same
Yeah.
thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then nuisance
Then we have a
zoning
public
commission
hearing, and then
update.
we vote.
No, that's new.
But does the ledge have to,
No.
so the bylaw would be what would go to the
Town meeting.
town
It would have to go
meeting?
to
None
town
of these are
meeting.
bylaws, because these are regular.
No, they
Yeah,
are.
if we keep it, you know, if we find a place, if we can,
If we can
you know,
sort of
look
say
at the
this is where it
nuisance
fits in
and
the
verify.
regulation, that it doesn't
And
need
then
town
we
meeting. If
could-
it's totally de novo, it would be town meeting.
So things like clarifying how many wells could be installed,
I
isn't
think that-
that kind of just?
I think that's a regulation,
clarification?
because we already have language about that in the,
Yeah.
like, the regulations have language about it. I
Right.
think we have identified that that language is incomplete.
Right.
There's an opportunity to offer greater clarity,
Right,
which we're
right,
providing.
right. I said it's a
And so- yeah,
clarification.
Yeah, I think it's a clarification. I mean, I think all of them are clarifications for this.
For existing regulations.
Right,
Well,
because
the
we,
Board
because
of-
we
Board of
have,
Health can adopt regulations anytime you wish outside of Title V. Anything that's septic related, you have to follow a process that's in Chapter 111, Section 31. It tells you have to advertise before, hold a hearing, and so forth. Tonight, you could, I would never suggest
Yeah.
this, but you could adopt a regulation right now on wells, ledge disruption. Would never recommend it. I suggest you always
And
have
the
a
board has
hearing.
never done it
The general
before without
public's
a hearing.
Right, I don't want
We
to
do.
change the custom, because I think it would, not
people
that
have-
anyone coming after us might
Right.
follow it, but I think
Exactly.
it
You always
would.
want to have a
and
hearing.
Just isn't good form, I don't
transparency,
think,
no, I
for-
think all of
yeah.
us would want, I just
But-
want to make sure I have the right mental picture for what our next steps are, and then thinking about what the
Yeah.
timeline.
The only difference from a bylaw, though, a bylaw, you have to get a full town meeting to change it. A Board of Health regulation can be changed depending on what the board wishes to do that night. Again, I don't suggest that, but,
Right.
but Title V for the cesspools, you are going to need to have a Title V appropriate hearing
Okay.
Yeah.
and send it to the state for
And we can do
review.
that all at the same time.
Yeah, for all three of these. That
Same
makes
hearing,
sense.
and, trying to remember, was there anything, oh, the only other thing that I didn't get to write out, but that we've tried to tackle before, is our zero tolerance on VOCs.
Yeah, well, that's.
The reason I'd
that's-
like to look at that is I'm uncomfortable that we have made an exception to that when we believe that the VOCs that were detected in someone's well were a direct result of them
Treatment.
having, right, treated it to address a bacteria issue that was found in the water supply system. And so to require them to clean up the bacteria and then penalize them for the
Right.
VOC presence, that was very low. You know,
Right.
we felt that was reasonable. But I just don't like having that variance to our rules on water quality.
Well, but that's a whole,
thing.
we talked about
That
that.
is a
That's
complex
whole-
one, so again, is that anything that, you know, that's the only other thing that I feel is,
Well, that's an update that we've been
I would-
talking about and talking
I
about.
would, in this, my 2 cents is I would say, I think that's a conversation worth having, just the same way the larger ledge conversation is. I might say, like, let's get these on the books, resolved, and then continue to work on that conversation. Does that seem reasonable?
It needs to
Yeah.
be addressed, but
Yeah.
it's not an
I feel like it would be
emergency.
more involved
It's going to
than
be more
this.
involved. It is.
And so, let's lock this down and then work on that. Does that feel good for the people?
I think that makes sense. And I think that's something that Agent Halal can also look at and see other towns that have private water, what sorts of regulations did they have regarding water quality, so.
What you see too is the industry is making it sound to the point where you buy bottled water now, they're really pushing purified water. And so they're saying, would you like to drink some lead? And you see the commercials all the time. And so I think the perception of having something in your water when it's coming from a pure source could be upsetting to some people that are drinking it because they're not for sure, or they didn't realize they were drinking certain volatiles, even though it might be below an EPA level. EPA levels aren't always seen by the general public as safe. And they change constantly, and this is always why it's such a long conversation.
Right.
Is they're set for public water, which cannot meet anything close to a private well, because they have to chlorinate that water. And sometimes it comes from lakes, which are affected by organic matter, like leaves. So it's so the EPA has to shuffle a little bit to make it, public water has, and that's the only standards we have out there. EPA and the DEP have never come out outside of bacteria with water levels. So it's
I'm not sure that I agree with that, but,
Cambridge had the trihalomethane.
do they have private well regulations at EPA's level?
no, they don't have private well, but it's all the same water usage, so why, when I'm being
I
supplied
see
by
what you're
private
coming
water?
from, yeah.
It's a much longer discussion, we do not have
It
time for
definitely
it right
is.
now.
We could go on. That's why that discussion might take another whole meeting.
No, it will.
Okay, so we have just a few more things. We have our schedule of meeting dates.
I vote we cancel January 2nd.
Really, I didn't care. Okay, that's fine. My kids.
What about the following week?
Well, then it,
Fine with me.
I don't feel strongly. I'm in town
Yeah.
because I'm on service, so.
Oh, we have a cancel, we have a following the week, you have agree with, or
I don't know how
either
busy we're
one?
gonna be, so I don't know whether to
Yeah.
do two
can always
meetings.
have an
I'd
extra
rather have
meeting.
two shorter meetings than one that goes till 1 p.m.
So it sounds like we can keep it?
Keep it, I don't know.
What do you think?
I'm not adverse to it, I don't know.
Just realize it's, let me see.
It'll probably snow up that
It's-
day.
We'll have to have the agenda set up like weeks in advance.
Yeah, you will, because I'm not here that week directly prior.
Okay.
So you will be having a meeting on,
Oh, you know what, if we can get our acts together, that could be a public hearing night. If there's nothing else
So you look,
scheduled.
Ellen.
I don't think you'd want to do that because
People
I
could
think
still be
residents would
hungover.
not be happy.
Oh, because it's too
Did say you
close
were
to a
trying
holiday?
do it.
Yeah, you'd
Oh.
be trying to hide it.
Miracle.
Don't make it,
Oh, okay.
Something-
I just thought it might be a
School vacation.
downtime for other
Yeah.
things, but, okay, all right.
Well, January
They're out.
2nd would be a
Or we come
questionable
next year.
All right,
date.
so
But,
do we
yeah,
want
I
to
mean,
hold on to the 2nd, or do we
You'd
want to
have to
move
have
it to
the
the
agenda
following?
on the 20th of December
It's in,
That's
in
fine.
order to have,
by
that's
this
the day
time
after the
frame.
meeting. So do you have the full agenda for the next
guess I'll find
meeting
out.
already? It's, I think it's
At the
a
moment, I
very
could go
odd
either way,
time.
because I don't know what my work schedule is yet for January. Either the 2nd or the
In January,
9th.
there are 6 Wednesdays.
Of 5.
What?
It can't be
Five.
6.
9, 6,
Yeah.
5. But there's
Definitely
5.
five.
There's an extra Wednesday.
The 2nd, 9, 16,
2nd,
23rd,
9,
and
16, 23, and 30.
5.
Yeah,
Or
there
you
can't
could
be
just
six.
wait
Actually,
and schedule.
No, you're right, 5,
If
sorry.
you need it.
No, I understand that. I know what I was
So what do we want to do?
I don't
I'm
know.
fine with the way it's written, but I'd, whatever.
What's
Do
the
you think we're
second meeting?
bonkers to do it on the 2nd, and we should just go the 9th?
I don't care whether you have it or not.
But your
I'm
concern
just
is we
not going
have
to
a
do
defined
anything
agenda.
between, I'm not
Yeah.
going to,
I think,
you will not get a packet, you will not,
yeah, I would almost rather come the 9th rather than come to the 2nd and not have too much,
Yeah.
like,
let's-
come all the way
to
out.
do
So
the 9th.
would you-
Yeah, well, I might not make the 9th, but that's okay.
would you do 2 weeks in a row?
Yeah.
16, 3rd.
Yeah, because other boards
my daughter's
meet on the other nights, that's
Um,
true.
So,
Yeah,
She
yeah,
in
you
college?
don't, you won't have the
Yeah,
room
but she'll be home.
because other boards meet
Winter
on
break.
the opposite.
Oh,
You
and
get the
both
first
rooms would be
and
What we
taken.
could do is leave the 9th open for emergencies only.
Dates.
All right, I guess we could stick with the 2nd.
okay.
I don't know.
It may be brief.
Where the, where's the list of dates?
Right here.
We may be tired.
It looks like this.
It was in your packet.
Yeah, I know, I have it, but I don't know where it is.
You kind of mind.
I just want to look at it right now.
Okay, the other thing I wondered, and maybe this doesn't need to be done, I mean, a lot of people already know it, but do enough people appreciate that we have additional meetings on an as-needed basis? So, there are a few comments, all meetings, here's where they meet. Do we want to add that, or
Why
is
don't we
that
just do 9 and
inviting an
23 in
expectation
January?
Yeah,
that
I
we're
don't
going to have
think
millions
that's,
of extra?
yeah,
Okay.
because then anytime an engineer wants something on an
They're like, I need a
off
special meeting. You're
Yeah.
like, no.
Well,
Okay.
why don't we just do 9 and 23 on January? It's still
Well,
2
we
weeks
may not
before the
then have,
6th.
we may not have the room for either of those weeks.
Because we have the first and third Wednesday typically, so that means that the second and
Fourth.
fourth. And then if we took the fifth, right, that maybe not a lot of people would have automatic ones, but then that'll be right next to the February 6th, so. Right,
Or just cancel
two
it. I
weeks
mean,
in.
people are uncomfortable. Just cancel it. Just have one in January.
I think we've
You
talked
can-
about this too long.
Yeah.
We just need to
For
decide what we
now,
want to do.
Cancel it,
You
and
know
I
what, for
could,
now, let's do
if I
this.
have agenda items, I can add it.
That sounds perfect.
Yeah. Okay,
5 Wednesdays in October.
that's fine. And then if we want to somehow do the 30th or whatever,
And then you can always add it.
add that, okay.
But for your typical, the only thing the only other questionable date, Mark, was in May,
May.
that
Yeah,
you,
usually May 1st, I'm
Always.
not available.
and I do know last year you did change that one meeting to Thursday.
I don't know this year what the schedule will be for me on the 1st of May, but it's usually then. It could be the 8th. I don't know yet.
Oh, okay.
All
So
right, so
keep
let's
it-
wait and we'll adjust. And
So,
is it easy enough for you to repost a revised
Yeah.
schedule? Okay.
but this gives me dates so that I can,
So-
as we get closer, I'm gonna be scheduling variance
Yeah.
hearings. So are you approving this with or without January 2nd?
What was the last thing we said? Without, and you'll see if anything comes
Okay.
up.
Sounds good.
And then we'll either add that back in, or add the 9th, or add the 30th, depending on what's going on.
So, motion, second.
So moved.
Second, and all those in favor? Aye. Okay,
Was that unanimous?
Yes.
Okay.
I think so. Yep. Okay. All right, the certificate program, do people want to go?
I went last year. I mean, what's the deal on the budget? So since I went last year, I mean, I
I'm not
don't
gonna
mind
go.
going.
I'd be interested in going. I don't know which days is better. I
It's the
need to look at
10th
my
or the
calendar.
17th.
I know, but I need to figure it
17th is the
out.
one right before the Thanksgiving week.
Ah, thanks.
But that's the one in Marlboro, so that's closer. It's kind of interesting, though, if you...
Oh, so it's kind of got everybody.
They were gone.
Oh, yeah. it is.
Good, yeah, good.
Yeah.
In the past,
Someday, we had some interesting
the
discussions.
grant funding from the region paid for this, it doesn't anymore.
What's it cost?
Not for
Pay
MAHB,
for it.
Okay.
So we have to pay
out of the Board of Health
ourselves, or
budget.
you? Oh, that's good.
Yeah,
So that means we don't have to take emergency preparedness for half of it? Or no?
right, because you're not getting any
Okay.
emergency preparedness
All right,
funding for
that's more
MAHB.
flexibility. I would likely go to the 11-17.
Okay, so Rebecca, you want to go, but you don't know which date?
Yeah, I have to check, there are a couple things that I just need to check that I don't have the information right now, because they involve my husband and his calendar.
Talking about Thanksgiving, too.
And Lisa and David, do you want to
I'm going to
go?
skip this year.
So Lisa's a no.
You
What do
can
you think?
put me down for the, it's the same thing on both the 10th and the 17th?
Yes.
Yeah, it
Yes,
is.
it's
It's
just
in
where
different
it
places,
is.
Taunton versus Marlboro.
We'll definitely go to Marlboro, then it's closer
A
to
lot
Taunton.
closer.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. And I've always gone, and I can try to get a scholarship
Oh,
from MAHB. I got one last year, so
okay.
it was at no cost
Oh,
to the town.
okay, great. Okay. Now, the companion event for this time of year. Holy moly.
Yeah, MHOA.
So would you be going to the 17th one?
Stamp.
Come back from one
Well,
and
that's
go right to the
if-
other?
if- That's why, I will decide, yeah.
Yeah.
But what I thought was interesting, now, MHOA, I have gone the past, I don't know how many years, and it's always been paid for with emergency preparedness funding, and it's still approved for emergency preparedness funding, provided I attend at least 50% of the sessions that deal with emergency preparedness. What I thought you would find very interesting is on Thursday, there is a session, where is it? Let me find it. Yes, the new pancake wood chip design IA system given by George Hufelder.
Wow.
So I thought I would attend that session.
Yay, great.
Definitely.
So I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But provided
Everything's
you,
food. There's like a layer cake, there's a pancake
pancake,
chip.
yeah. Provided you allow me to go, because I'll be out of the office. So I would
Okay.
request a vote of the
Okay.
board.
So do we have a motion to approve Ellen's attendance at the MHOA conference?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And I'll note that Mark usually goes too, so,
And Mark
but
went.
Ashland pays for him as part of his
And
job
Beth,
duties here.
Beth goes.
Oh, okay.
Everybody goes.
Everybody who's anybody.
In boards of
There.
health, you'll
Yeah.
find that boards of health are very understaffed.
Are you talking about the
MHOA,
MHOA?
Is that administrators and agents?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, health officers, I believe is the HOA.
But that's inclusive, yeah.
Yes.
So, okay, good, and then we have, I think we just have our payroll and minutes and agenda items, so let's do agenda items and then we can let Rick go. So, anything for,
You
I
went to
would
get the
say,
stamps.
Oh, good.
for the next one, I guess we keep the 1 and 2 under chairs business.
So that's-
Yep.
What are you talking
Yeah,
about?
continuation of discussion, Rick, update discussion and ledge disruption.
Do we have variance hearings next time?
I don't think there's, I'm not sure, I don't believe there is yet. Yeah, I don't think so, but I don't remember.
Okay, great. Good time to continue that discussion.
Yeah, okay. All
Do
right,
you
if
want
anyone
any-
thinks of anything else, but,
Do we expect to have Scott's report by then?
actually, yes, I think so.
So we just
Right.
want to-
Yeah, it's nice. That's
Do we have any normal things that we expect for 41 North
I
Main?
could travel.
That
Yeah.
can kind of come up as,
Right, I could believe that'll
Catch as
be
a catch
added at some point.
that sounds good.
And the minutes were great.
I didn't have
You
any
did a great
comments.
job.
Finding date.
Did you hear that, Ellen?
Thank you
Yes, I
so
had
far.
tiny, I think, just making sure
You never
who
wanna
was
give those
they
up.
in the second
No.
half of a sentence would be clear to, since I read some twice, but that was about it.
Should we terminate the televising?
Yes.
Yes, actually, so Rick, we're just signing payrolls and that's
Less
it.
coverage.
So you can end the telecast.